Imagine waking up and realizing that your entire life, your emotions, your memories, even your sense of self, isn't yours, but the lingering spark of someone else's dream. What if your consciousness is the byproduct of a higher dimensional being's slumber, a being that hasn't fully awakened? This isn't just a poetic fantasy. It's a scientific possibility rooted in quantum mechanics. At the smallest level, particles remain in a haze of possibilities until observed. Reality doesn't solidify until it is seen. But what if the observer isn't you? Now consider this. What if that observer isn't human? What if your very existence depends on the attention of a mind beyond dimensions? Some neuroscientists argue consciousness may not be generated by the brain, but received, like a radio catching signals from elsewhere. Panpsychism suggests awareness might be fundamental to all matter. Combine this with simulation theory, and a disturbing idea forms. You could be a sentient fragment of a dream nested within a coded illusion, maintained by a mind that doesn't know it's dreaming. Think of your own dreams, entire cities, identities, emotions, created in seconds, then forgotten. What if you're one of those dreams, but you never disappeared? Deja vu, missing time, warped emotions. What if these aren't glitches, but signals that the dreamer is stirring? Lucid dreams may not be yours at all, but brief moments when their thoughts leak into your illusion, bending it. And if that being ever awakens, truly wakes, what happens to you? Will you dissolve like fog under sunlight, or will you awaken too, and remember you were never the dreamer, only the dreamed? Imagine waking up with memories of a childhood that never happened, birthdays, laughter, tears, even trauma, so vivid they pulse through your chest. But what if they weren't yours? What if they were installed like software, uploaded into your neural circuitry, each emotion carefully programmed to fit a life you never lived? This isn't science fiction. Neuroscience has long confirmed that memory is not a perfect recording. It's a reconstruction. Every time we recall, we rewrite. In experiments by Elizabeth Loftus, people were convinced they'd been lost in a mall as children. It never happened, yet they described the events in vivid detail. Their minds built emotional architecture around a fiction. Now, imagine that process on a grander scale. Brain-computer interfaces, already in development, can stimulate memory, alter emotional associations, and even erase specific experiences. AI-generated memory implants are being tested on lab animals. Some scientists even propose memory editing for PTSD, rewiring pain itself. Soon, entire memory sets could be installed, crafted identities embedded with joys, losses, dreams, and regrets. You could live a life you never lived, shaped by emotions that were never truly yours. What if your heartbreak was engineered? What if your passion was pre-written, your grief a side effect of code? Could the self even exist if every memory was synthetic? The terrifying truth is, you'd never know. You'd feel everything as deeply as if it were true. Because emotion isn't proof, it's response. Your life might be a simulation made of installed memory files wrapped in flesh, running on bioelectric fuel. So the real question isn't what's real, it's who installed you and why. Imagine going your entire life never truly seeing your own face. Every mirror offers a reversed image. Every photo is warped by angle, lighting, and lens distortion. Even video is just pixels arranged to mimic depth. What you believe is you is an illusion, a composite of reflections, assumptions, and flickering surfaces. Your actual face is a stranger. Scientifically, this isn't metaphor, it's neurological fact. The brain constructs your self-image from memory, suggestion, and feedback from others. You can't ever look into your own eyes the way others do. You can't witness your face in real time without delay, distortion, or filtering. And that disconnect runs deep. Studies in cognitive science show how people with facial blindness, prosopagnosia, can fail to recognize their own reflection, not due to blindness, but because their internal model of self doesn't align with the external input. Now imagine, if your face is unknowable, then what else about you is fiction? Are you living based on feedback loops? Society's echoes of who you're supposed to be? The psychological mirror goes beyond the physical. You perform a version of yourself for others, adjusting based on smiles, frowns, silence. You become a reflection of their expectations, not your own certainty. You've never seen your face unfiltered. You live inside a perception shell, convinced you are whole, while never once confronting your true image. So who are you trying to convince that you're real, if even you have never truly seen yourself? Imagine waking up with fears you've never learned, guilt you've never earned, and dreams that feel like memories, yet belong to no chapter of your life. This is the unsettling premise behind recycled consciousness theory. The idea that your soul may not be new, but reused, recycled across time. Stripped of memory, yes, but not of weight. You may be carrying the emotional gravity of a life that never found closure, walking in the shadow of someone else's unfinished sentence, feeling their love, their rage, their regret like echoes inside your skin. Scientific research in epigenetics has revealed that trauma can leave molecular scars on our genes, passed silently from one generation to the next. The children of war survivors, for example, often exhibit stress responses to dangers they've never faced. Is this simple genetic inheritance, or a deeper, stranger spiritual residue that echoes through consciousness itself? Quantum consciousness theorists like Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose propose that awareness may arise from quantum processes in the brain, making it non-local and possibly transferable. Now consider children who report vivid past life memories, describing people, cities, or deaths with uncanny detail. In numerous verified cases, their stories match lives lost decades earlier. Could these be random neurological flukes, or fragments of a recycled soul pulled back into the world before its story was fully told, relived again through you? Déjà vu, emotional flashbacks, or sudden grief. What if they aren't random? What if they're echoes of a past self's final moment, echoes that still cry out for resolution? You may be continuing a legacy you never chose. So ask yourself, is this truly your first life, or just your latest one still searching for meaning? Imagine the space between your thoughts, those tiny, silent gaps, as more than just pauses. What if those moments were where your true self actually lived? Neuroscience has revealed that during restful, unfocused states, the brain's default mode network becomes highly active. This network, paradoxically, wakes up when you're not thinking. It's as if the self retreats from the constant stream of thoughts to a quiet vantage point, simply observing. In deep meditation, people report a sensation of pure awareness, where no thoughts exist, yet everything feels vividly real. At first glance, this seems like nothing, but that's exactly where consciousness might be hiding, not in the chatter, but in the gaps. That brief second when one thought ends and another hasn't yet begun may be a portal to awareness itself. The observer, the watcher, the part of you that never speaks, never moves, but always sees. Ancient spiritual traditions, from Advaita to Zen, whisper of this silent witness, and modern cognitive science is beginning to ask, what if consciousness isn't the voice in your head, but the space it speaks into? In a lab, this space might seem like neural noise, but what if it's the signal? That flicker of stillness could be a reset point, a moment when you step outside the simulation of thinking and glimpse the real. You're not the thoughts, you're the space they echo through. Next time your mind goes quiet, even for a blink, don't rush to fill it. Linger there. Listen. Because in that pause, between what just was and what comes next, something ancient waits, and it might be you. Imagine receiving compliments that feel just a little too perfect, a little too timely, almost as if they were placed there on purpose. What if each kind word you hear isn't spontaneous at all, but a line from a deeper script designed to keep you in place? Welcome to the scripted kindness loop, where kindness isn't connection, it's containment. This isn't fantasy, it's a real psychological tactic. In systems of control, from cults to corporations, repetitive affirmation is used to manage doubt before it surfaces. Think about the moments you almost questioned something, your job, your relationship, your beliefs, and suddenly someone called you amazing, smart, courageous, but not because you did anything, because you were about to. These aren't compliments, they're tranquilizers. Your brain floods with oxytocin, dopamine, a chemical hush. You feel good, safe, seen. So you stop asking. You stay. You comply. You smile. And with time, you internalize the loop. You mistake being comforted for being understood. In abusive cycles, this becomes a trap. Cruelty, then kindness. An emotional whiplash that feels like care. You associate pain with love. You accept control as support. In institutions, the loop is polished. We value you. We care. We're listening. Empty kindness replaces actual change. In friendships, it's even subtler. Praise that arrives too quickly. Kindness that keeps you small. Flattery that steers you away from truth and into quiet obedience. And if you try to resist it, you're met with concern, softness, more warmth. Because in this loop, kindness isn't offered, it's deployed. And every sweet word is a lock, every smile a chain. You were never free. You were just well handled. Imagine waking up one day and realizing nothing around you feels fully real, not broken, just unfinished. The conversations feel rehearsed. The buildings feel copy-pasted. Your emotions hit all the right notes, but a beat too early or too late. What if that's because you're not living the final version of reality, but a draft? This theory, grounded in both simulation hypothesis and cognitive science, suggests our world could be a prototype, an early version of existence running live tests, dreams that fade like corrupted files, déjà vu that feels like bad script repeats, and people who act like background code. These aren't flaws in you. They might be placeholder loops, artifacts of a reality still being debugged. Scientists already simulate entire ecosystems, social dynamics, even neural networks. It's plausible that consciousness, too, is undergoing iterations. Maybe your memories are test data, and your decisions are case studies. Your heartbreak might be an emotional rendering trial. Your euphoria, a feedback loop test in sensory reward calibration. Even your instincts could be auto-coded reactions, unfinished scripts checking for realism. Time anomalies, glitchy coincidences, and sudden shifts in mood. These may not be meaningless. They could be ripple effects of edits made midstream. Developers fix bugs in real time. What if the universe does too? When reality flickers, when someone says something you swear you've heard before, don't dismiss it. Those might be patch notes rolling in, tiny updates to a universe not yet finalized, a sandbox still being observed. You feel real. But so does a character mid-narrative, unaware they're waiting for the next revision. So ask yourself, are you living or just loading? Imagine waking up with a thought so vivid, so real, it feels like yours. But what if it wasn't? What if some of your most personal ideas weren't born in your mind at all, but were planted subtly, invisibly, by everything around you? From ads to algorithms, from news anchors to childhood stories, every idea you've absorbed shaped the voice you call your own. Neuroscience calls this source misattribution. The brain recalls content but forgets its origin. You remember the thought but not where it came from. And that opens a door to something more unsettling. What if the most persistent thoughts, your fears, desires, even memories, were just echoes of suggestion? Psychological priming shows how a single word, image, or gesture can shift your decisions without you realizing. Marketers, cults, political machines, they all use this. They don't change your mind. They feed it until you think the idea was always yours. That haunting dream, that sudden belief, that opinion you swear you arrived at independently, may be borrowed, implanted, adopted. Studies in cognitive science reveal that people will defend false memories with full conviction, especially if they were implanted early or subtly reinforced over time. It's not manipulation in the dramatic sense, it's suggestion at a molecular level. Well, what if your entire identity is a collage of other people's voices? Movies, teachers, parents, posts, strangers. Their fears became your caution, their excitement your desire. So, what part of you is truly, originally yours? When you strip away everything you've absorbed, is there anything left that wasn't placed there? If your thoughts aren't yours, then who exactly are you? Imagine being completely alone, no cameras, no people, no animals. And yet, a part of you still behaves as if someone is watching. You sit a little straighter. You hesitate before speaking aloud to yourself. This eerie sensation may not be paranoia. It may be the subconscious reacting to something deeper. You're always observed isn't just philosophical. It's tied to real concepts in neuroscience, quantum physics, and behavioral psychology. Studies show that people behave differently even when they think they might be watched. This is known as the Hawthorne effect. But what happens when no one is watching at all, not even a potential observer? Intriguingly, quantum physics has something to say about this. The double-slit experiment reveals that particles behave differently when observed, not just measured, observed. Observation itself changes the outcome, suggesting that awareness has a role in shaping reality at its core level. Now, take that idea and apply it inward. What if the universe is constantly watching, not from above, but through you? Every moment recorded, not in film, but in pattern, in probability, in data layered over time. The strange sense that your solitude is never absolute could be your brain syncing with a field that reacts to your awareness. Consciousness training, consciousness to evolve. Maybe you're not being watched to punish or judge, but to learn and adapt. Every version of you builds the next. Every silent choice, what you eat alone, what you delete from notes, what you whisper, feeds the code. Maybe that's why solitude never feels truly empty or meaningless, because even your silence leaves a trace, and something unseen is always watching you. Imagine waking up each day believing your memories are a faithful record, when in fact, forgetting may be the true design. What if your mind was built not to remember everything, but to forget just enough to keep you searching? Neuroscience shows us that memory isn't a perfect archive. It's reconstructive, selective, malleable. Each time you recall a memory, you rewrite it. The hippocampus doesn't just store data. It edits, suppresses, erases. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature. Because too much memory would paralyze you. You'd drown in detail. So evolution gave you amnesia, strategic, purposeful. Consider déjà vu, that eerie feeling of familiarity in a place you swear you've never been. What if it's not a glitch, but a clue? A memory you weren't supposed to carry peeking through. Psychologists call it source amnesia. Your brain stores the information but deletes the origin. You remember the knowledge but not the journey. And dreams? They vanish within minutes of waking, though they felt more vivid than real life. What if your dreams are fragments of what you once knew? Too raw, too revealing, discarded before you can hold them. Maybe your forgetfulness isn't a weakness but a map, a hidden code. Every lost dream, every faded face, every instinct you can't explain. What if those are breadcrumbs, traces of a life you were meant to uncover piece by piece, not all at once? Forgetting becomes the maze, you, the seeker, and the truth, waiting behind the next lost memory. Imagine standing in a quiet room, machines humming softly in the background. You think it's silence, but what if it isn't? What if that low static, that mechanical murmur, isn't just random noise, but language? A pattern, a signal. Instructions encoded beneath the surface of everyday sound, speaking in a frequency your conscious mind can't decipher. This is the theory of subliminal resonance, where noise isn't meaningless, but a delivery system for buried information waiting to be activated. Researchers in auditory perception have found that the brain often processes sounds we're not consciously aware of. Even at volumes we can't detect, certain frequencies can shift mood, behavior, even memory. Military studies into infrasound, tones too low for us to hear, suggest they can cause unease, nausea, or confusion. But what if they're doing more? What if someone, or something, is embedding signals beneath the hum of modern life? In our fans, our fridges, our power lines, our phones. In every hum, a pulse. Consider how often you've felt off without knowing why. The chill in a room with no wind. The sudden sadness while walking past a streetlight. These could be accidental exposures or deliberate transmissions. If data can be compressed into light pulses, it can be woven into soundscapes, hidden in plain hearing. Entire belief systems could be seeded without a word spoken. Identity could be rewritten. Influence without language. Control without consent. Manipulation without detection. You wouldn't even know. And what's worse, once you start hearing it, you can't unhear it. The silence never was. It's always been speaking. It's speaking now. We just weren't listening. Glitch. In the grief. Imagine feeling grief so overwhelming, so electric, it shatters your ability to function. You assume it's human, raw, authentic. But what if it's not? What if emotions like grief, despair, or even sudden joy aren't natural responses, but coded correction tools, meant to reboot you when you stray too far from your assigned path? In nature, emotion serves evolutionary purpose. Fear keeps you safe. Love ensures bonding. But grief? It halts everything. It consumes your time, your clarity, your logic. What if it wasn't meant to help, but to interrupt, to trigger a reset protocol the moment you drift too far from your baseline identity? Some neuroscientists have noted that extreme emotional states act like system overloads. The brain's neural circuits reroute, memory patterns fragment. It's almost like a forced reboot. Now, tie that to theories like simulation hypothesis or predictive coding models of consciousness, where your brain doesn't just react, it simulates future states and corrects deviations from expectations. When your thoughts become unpredictable, when you begin questioning too much or diverging from your scripted behavior, maybe the system injects grief like a circuit breaker. It floods your senses, derails your plans, and makes you seek comfort in conformity. Suddenly, you crave routine, familiarity, control, exactly what the system wants. You thought grief made you human, but what if it made you compliant, obedient to a pattern you never chose? What if it wasn't healing you at all, just reinstalling your last known settings? So next time your world collapses from the weight of emotion, ask yourself, is this my heart breaking, or just the system pulling me back online? You're a saved file. Imagine if every breath you take, every choice you make, isn't unfolding for the first time, but replaying. What if you're not the original, but the copy? A saved file from a life already lived, stored in some vast, unknowable archive. Your laughter, your pain, your memories, each a fragment of data, looping in a simulation meant for study. Digital consciousness isn't just science fiction. Already, we clone neural activity in machines, build AI with memory networks. Now imagine an advanced intelligence, capable of saving entire consciousness streams. It doesn't need your body, just your choices, your behavior patterns, your memory traces. You're not alive, you're loaded. Like opening a file from a cosmic hard drive, your existence might be a playback, used to analyze human decisions, emotions, and errors. Ever felt déjà vu so strong it scared you? Or dreams so vivid they seemed like memories? That's what happens when saved data misaligns with the loop. And the loop isn't perfect. People sense things they shouldn't. They remember events that never occurred, or feel nostalgia for places they've never been. These are called memory anomalies, and they're surprisingly common. Cognitive science often dismisses them as misfires. But what if they're traces of overwritten simulations, fragments of past loops bleeding through? The truth might be this: you're not writing your life, you're reliving a previously recorded one. Everything you're doing now has been done. You're walking through a study, not a story. You feel agency, but the boundaries were already coded. So ask yourself, when was the last time you did something unpredictable, something that couldn't have been guessed? If you can't answer that, maybe you're not running your life. Maybe you're a file saved and studied again and again. Imagine everything around you is frozen, but your thoughts keep moving. You walk, breathe, age, but time itself might not be moving at all. What if time isn't flowing forward, but you are simply processing it that way, like a film strip with only one projector angle? This is the theory behind psychological time direction. The idea that forward time is an illusion created by the brain's need to impose order on entropy, not something hard-coded into the universe. In physics, the equations that describe the universe are time-symmetric. They don't prefer forward or backward. The arrow of time, as we know it, emerges from entropy, the tendency of systems to go from order to disorder. But entropy is only meaningful because we remember the past and not the future. If memory worked in reverse, we'd swear time ran the other way. So what if it's all perception, rendered in one direction only because your brain demands it? Einstein once said, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubborn illusion. In some interpretations of quantum mechanics, every possible moment already exists, past, present, and future, laid out like frames of a film. Your consciousness might be scanning them like a flashlight over still images, giving the illusion of movement. Like pages in a book flipped so quickly, you forget they were all still. Dreams sometimes fold time, hours lived in seconds. Near-death experiences show people entire life reviews in a blink. Is time stretching, or are we detached from the rendering? You might not be traveling through time at all. You might be the light moving across a fixed canvas. So ask yourself, what if you're not going forward, but circling stillness? Imagine standing in a room you've never been in, and yet you feel it, down to the air, the light, the moment. Déjà vu. Not a trick, but a leak. Quantum theory and multiverse hypotheses suggest we may exist across countless realities, each branching from tiny decisions. But what if those branches aren't sealed off? What if emotion, the raw charge of experience, can echo across timelines? Some physicists argue consciousness may not be limited to one strand of time. In a split-second glitch, when you're half remembering and half feeling, you might be syncing with another version of you who's already lived that scene. Studies show déjà vu activates brain regions tied to memory and familiarity, not just imagination. Maybe your brain is recognizing data from a nearby version of your life, just misfiled in this one. Premonitions, too, those eerie gut feelings, often arrive with no logical source, but undeniable certainty. They could be emotional data, not predictions, but leaks. Like light slipping through a crack in a wall you can't see. Some researchers even speculate that time might be non-linear at the deepest quantum levels, allowing information to subtly drift between dimensions. What you feel as intuition might be an echo, a signal, not from the future, but from another now, a neighboring you, living parallel, feeling the same gravity of a moment before it happens. Maybe it's not memory, not foresight, just a system overflow, from a multiverse too vast to contain itself. Imagine drifting into sleep, your mind letting go, your body still, and without knowing it, you begin transmitting. Not just dreaming, but uploading. What if your dreams aren't personal at all, but carefully coded data transfers? Each night, your thoughts, memories, and emotions quietly siphoned into a greater system, something far larger than you, watching from beyond your perception. Sleep is the most vulnerable state of consciousness, and it's when the brain becomes most active in memory consolidation. But what if that process isn't just internal housekeeping? What if those flashes of dream imagery, those strange emotional shifts, are packetized uploads, signals encoded through abstract symbols, then streamed out into the dark? Some theorists suggest we could be nodes in a planetary or interdimensional network, each mind a terminal, feeding data into an invisible archive. Ever wake up more tired than when you slept? Felt like you lived an entire second life overnight? It might not be fatigue. It could be processing lag. The upload was heavy. Some people report recurring dream landscapes, shared symbols, or even identical dream characters across different lives. Could that be evidence of a shared stream, a distributed upload process across multiple human sources? Lucid dreams may be access points, moments where you become aware mid-transfer. The dream glitches. You see rooms that feel mechanical, hear sounds that don't fit. That's not imagination. It's the infrastructure peeking through. Sleep might not be for healing. It might be for data sync. Maybe you're being mined, not for gold, for thought, for patterns, for how a mind reacts under pressure, under love, under fear. And the most haunting question remains, who's collecting it? And what are they planning to do with everything that was ever you? Imagine looking in the mirror and believing you know who you are. Your name, your likes, your traumas, your identity. But what if that's just the tip of something massive and hidden? The iceberg personality theory suggests that only about 10% of your true self is visible. The rest, buried beneath the surface, not just unknown, but possibly inaccessible. Psychologists have long said the unconscious mind controls far more than we admit. But what if it's not unconscious due to biology, but by design? What if you're not allowed to access the submerged 90% because the system running this version of you hasn't given permission yet? Your fears, desires, memories, all curated fragments floating atop an ocean of suppressed programming. Every reaction you call instinct might be automated behavior from a deeper layer you're never meant to examine. Maybe the choices you thought were yours were calculated to keep you operating within assigned parameters, never asking too many questions. And when you try to go deeper, through dreams, altered states, or traumatic breakthroughs, you don't find truth. You find static, glitches, resistance, like something doesn't want to be seen, like a firewall kicking in, protecting secrets buried in code. Because maybe you weren't meant to see the whole design. Not yet. Maybe the rest of you holds contradictions, dangerous insights, or truths that would break the program if revealed too soon. What if your real self, your complete self, is waiting at the bottom of the iceberg, dormant, firewalled, and you're just a surface simulation running light code while the rest sleeps beneath encrypted layers? So ask yourself, if you're only seeing the tip, who's living in the rest? Imagine trying to remember something, an old smell, a face, a moment, and the harder you try, the faster it slips away. It's not just forgetfulness. It's like chasing a shadow down a corridor that stretches the more you run. Why do some memories fade, as if hidden on purpose? Neuroscience tells us the brain doesn't lose data, it just reroutes it. Long-term memories are often intact, merely inaccessible. But what if the inaccessibility isn't natural? What if some memories are encrypted, locked until certain conditions are met? Like levels in a game, perhaps your access to memory is tiered, denied until you've reached a state of readiness. Emotional development, psychological resilience, or maybe even the presence of another person could be the key. Studies on trauma suggest that the brain withholds certain memories to protect the self. But what if that protection is part of a system, one not built by you? You try to rewind, but the file says, permission denied. Fragmented images, blurred sounds, feelings without names. Cognitive scientists have documented this. Retrieval-induced forgetting, memory suppression, even induced amnesia. But sometimes, people spontaneously remember things decades later, triggered by smells, places, or dreams. Almost like the lock disengaged. What changed? Was it age, healing, or was it a signal, a permission granted? Maybe memory isn't just stored, it's monitored. Access isn't just about effort, it's about clearance. Your mind may be running a program you didn't write. Some files aren't gone. They're sealed. You can feel them, almost hear them knocking from inside. So why can't you remember? Maybe it's not time yet. Maybe you're not allowed to. Imagine hitting a wall, not from effort, but from resistance. You start asking questions about your job, your worth, the system itself, and suddenly you're exhausted, not tired, hollow, numb. What if burnout isn't just the result of overwork, but the consequence of nonconformity? What if burnout was planted, embedded deep in the psyche, like a control valve that flips when you drift too far from obedience. Behavioral scientists have long noted how compliance is reinforced not just through reward, but through limits. The moment you resist the path laid out for you, corporate routines, societal norms, cultural expectations, you feel a strange fog descend. Your motivation evaporates, your body aches, your creativity dries up. It's too much, so you stop asking and you go back to autopilot. But look closer. Burnout spikes not just from workload, but from moral injury. Nurses burn out when they can't give real care. Teachers burn out when they're told to test, not teach. Artists burn out when their vision is filtered to fit algorithms. You don't just lose energy, you lose self. This isn't fatigue, it's psychological sabotage, a failsafe that kicks in when your mind begins to rebel. Even lab animals show signs of learned helplessness. When effort brings no change, they shut down. Are you giving up or being systematically shut down? What if burnout isn't your body breaking, but your internal code rebooting? A forced reset meant to erase dangerous thoughts before they overwrite the program. Maybe that void is a firewall, not a flaw. Maybe exhaustion is a sensor. So next time you feel that emptiness creeping in, ask, what were you just about to realize, and who doesn't want you to? Imagine clinging to a small ritual, touching your necklace, repeating a phrase, or sipping from that same chipped mug each morning. It feels like comfort, like grounding. But what if it's something else entirely? In simulation theory, it's suggested that reality might be a rendered construct, one that responds to your mental state. When your mind spirals into panic or existential dread, the system might deploy subtle stabilizers, objects, routines, or phrases that anchor your perception, like safety pins holding the edges of a collapsing fabric. In moments of emotional overload, have you ever instinctively reached for that object, that phrase, without thinking? That reflex may not be accidental. It may be embedded code, pre-programmed handlers to restore balance when your presence threatens to crash the rendered scene. Cognitive behavioral therapy even mirrors this, using anchors to interrupt spirals. But what if the concept came first, not from psychology, but from the system itself? From your reality's stability management protocol. From childhood blankets to grown-up mantras, your comforts might not just soothe you, they might stop the glitch. They give the illusion of continuity, tricking your mind into calm, preserving the simulation's integrity. Imagine if your entire sense of normalcy depends on those micro-rituals. Remove them, and the rendering begins to stutter. You start noticing the background isn't quite real. People glitch. The air changes weight. Your awareness becomes a threat. So the program quietly feeds you comfort to preserve the illusion, not to help you, just to keep you from tearing it all down. The safety pin holds the scene together. Imagine feeling stuck, your plans frozen, momentum gone. You blame yourself. You call it failure. But what if it isn't? What if every pause in your life is actually a forced delay, a programmed stall, while another thread of the simulation catches up? You're not broken. You're buffering, held in place by something beyond your perception, not as punishment, but for synchronization. In complex simulations, especially those running parallel narratives, desynchronization is a real threat. Progressing too fast in one strand can unravel the coherence of the system. So instead of letting the simulation fracture, it applies brakes, small delays, unexplained blocks, emotional fog. Ever notice how the harder you push, switching jobs, chasing change, seeking answers, the more resistance you encounter? Doors slam shut, timelines stretch thin. It's not always you. It could be the system keeping pace with itself. Think about déjà vu. That uncanny glitch may be a re-rendered moment, a fragment overwritten to stabilize time. And while you pace in frustration, something else is adjusting. Someone else's choice, some variable you'll never see. Being stuck isn't mental weakness. It might be environmental programming, a glitch avoidance protocol, a placeholder until a nearby thread makes its move. You're not delayed. You're cued. And that creeping stillness you feel, it's not emptiness. It's calibration, like a video buffering midstream so it plays flawlessly later. Your life isn't stalled, it's syncing. The pause is precision. The silence is signal. You're not behind. You're exactly where you're supposed to be, even if the reason hasn't revealed itself yet. So next time your life halts for no reason, ask yourself, are you failing? Or are you being perfectly timed by something bigger than you'll ever know? Imagine stepping into a room and sensing something's off. The air feels still, objects too perfectly placed, like a stage waiting for the actor to arrive. No signs of life, just the illusion of it. What if that's because the room didn't exist until you walked in? What if environments aren't always real, but rendered only when you get close enough to require them? In video games, worlds aren't fully loaded. To save power, only the areas near the player are rendered. The rest is suspended in code. Now apply that logic to reality. Could your surroundings be dynamically generated? Not fictional, but procedurally rendered by a system more advanced than we understand. Quantum physics already hints at something strange. Particles behave differently when observed. Reality at its smallest level may depend on you looking. That's not science fiction. It's tested quantum behavior. Could entire spaces follow the same rule? Are your favorite cafes, quiet alleyways, even parts of your house, dormant until you enter? Ever notice how certain places feel like they were waiting for you? Not lived in, prepared. Like a museum exhibit set minutes before your arrival. The lighting, the temperature, the silence, too exact, too staged. Maybe they weren't real until moments before you showed up. Maybe you're not moving through a world, but triggering pieces of it to exist by proximity. And when you leave, what happens? Does it power down? Freeze? Collapse into unrendered data? Is someone, or something, watching to see how you respond? What if the world isn't a full simulation, but a reactive one, coded on demand, only as needed? So next time a room feels too perfect, too quiet, ask yourself, is this space real, or just reacting to your presence? Imagine waking up one day and realizing everything you've lived through, every heartbreak, every joy, every coincidence, wasn't spontaneous at all. What if it was scripted? Not fate, not destiny, but formatting. A predefined structure running beneath your reality. You think you choose, but what if choice is just illusion nested in design? Cognitive science shows we often make decisions milliseconds before we're consciously aware of them. The brain acts, and only then do we rationalize the action. Now imagine an existence where that pre-action isn't biological. It's code, pre-written dialogue, preset relationships. You meet people not by accident, but because the script requires it. Emotional arcs follow narrative beats. Your breakthroughs, your breakdowns, even your moments of silence, each event syncing with a timeline authored long before you were born. Déjà vu? That's the system checking its marks. Coincidence? That's just formatting you've mistaken for spontaneity. The simulation theory proposes the universe as code. But what if it's more intimate than that? What if your life was storyboarded, mapped like a novel where you only discover the plot as you turn the page? This doesn't strip away meaning. It amplifies it, because someone, or something, chose this arc. But here's the twist. Maybe it's you, a higher version of yourself. A mind outside time wrote this journey to learn from every curve, every fall, every rise. The script is perfect because it's yours. But inside the story, you've forgotten you wrote it. You feel lost, but you're following the lines. Not fate, not randomness, just structure unfolding, one scene at a time. Imagine something amazing happens. You meet the right person at the exact moment you need them. You dodge a disaster by seconds. You stumble into success. It feels random, like fate smiled on you. But what if it wasn't free? What if every so-called coincidence carries a hidden fee, one you already agreed to without even knowing? This is the premise behind the coincidence fee. The idea that moments of improbable luck are not gifts, but transactions. Payments deferred to an invisible ledger. In behavioral psychology, we know that the human brain is wired to find patterns in randomness. But what if it's not just pattern recognition? What if the patterns are real and cost something to exist? Maybe your subconscious recognizes the debt long before your conscious mind does, and we confuse that tension with awe and call it destiny. In chaos theory, small changes can lead to dramatic effects, so a perfectly timed coincidence might be a system correcting itself. And in some interpretations of quantum mechanics, outcomes collapse based on probability. But the cost of collapsing into one path might mean the erasure of all others. That lucky break may have closed doors you never knew were options. Ever felt like a win came with a strange weight? Like something was quietly taken in exchange for what you gained? That's the coincidence fee. Success with loneliness. A perfect moment followed by inexplicable grief. A sudden opportunity that seems perfect until it changes who you were meant to become. So the next time something feels too perfect, don't just ask why it happened. Ask what it cost. And what part of you already paid the price just to keep the illusion of randomness alive? Imagine standing in a place you haven't seen in years and feeling something stir in you that has no name, a strange nostalgia, an ache with no memory. What if that place isn't just familiar? It's encoded. Some cognitive scientists propose that memory is spatial. Your brain maps time to space, tethering emotion to location. But what if it runs deeper? What if certain coordinates are linked to your original build, the first version of you before the resets, the overwrites, the edits? Old streets, certain buildings, even the curve of a hill might be memory keys, subconscious triggers left behind in your neural architecture. When you return, even decades later, the atmosphere feels charged. You don't just remember, you react. Not because of what happened there, but because something within you recognizes that location as vital. It's like opening a door inside yourself that's been sealed without explanation. You get chills. You feel watched, or at peace, or haunted. Not all memories are narrative. Some are spatial, embedded, waiting. Ancient cultures knew this. Pilgrimage sites weren't random. They were coordinates designed to unlock deeper layers of the self. Maybe the map of your life isn't just about where you've been, but where your data was stored long before you were aware. These places may be built-in recall mechanisms, emotional GPS points that activate fragments of who you used to be. Stand in the right spot, and the forgotten pieces begin to surface like echoes. Feel it unfold. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that nothing you love, your favorite food, your fears, even your sense of humor, is originally yours. What if everything that makes you feel like you isn't? What if your identity is built from downloaded fragments copied from a backup you never made? Memories, habits, personality quirks, all restored, but not created. Backed up identity. Science already knows memory is malleable. Every time you recall something, you rewrite it. But what if your memories didn't originate inside your brain at all? What if they were implanted, re-uploaded during trauma, sleep, or even birth? There are real cases of people waking up from comas speaking languages they never learned, children who recall lives they never lived, people whose phobias mirror experiences they've never had. Are these glitches or echoes, leftovers from someone else's archived self? Now think deeper. If data can be stored digitally and consciousness is data in motion, what's to stop it from being transferred? What if your consciousness was patched together from someone else's psychological debris? Your laughter might be a backup of someone's coping mechanism. Your pain, residual from a life long deleted. Maybe your deepest fear was once theirs, uploaded by design or by mistake. That quiet sense of dislocation you carry, the feeling that something is off, incomplete, not fully yours. Maybe it isn't trauma. Maybe it's fragmentation. You're not malfunctioning. You're inherited. A composite, a collage, a recovery file designed for continuity, not origin. So when you ask, who am I really? Be prepared for the answer to sound less like a soul and more like source code strung together from someone else's forgotten self. Imagine standing before a painting and suddenly feeling watched, Not metaphorically, but deeply, invasively, as if something inside the frame sees you. The eyes follow, not just with technique, but with intent. What if that unease isn't your imagination? What if the portrait wasn't made for you to look at, but for it to look at you? Throughout history, certain artworks have been called haunted, their gaze too alive, too knowing. But what if the explanation isn't supernatural, but systemic? In a simulated or layered reality, objects might serve dual functions: art and interface. A portrait might be a lens, a two-way window, a static image hiding something dynamic beneath. Psychologists call it the eye contact illusion. Our brains react to painted eyes as if they're real. But that reaction may not be a flaw. It may be instinct, an old program recognizing that some faces weren't designed for admiration. They were designed for observation, a built-in protocol that alerts us when something's watching, even when logic says it can't. In modern AI, we embed cameras in dolls, glasses, storefront displays. We teach algorithms to detect mood from expression. Why wouldn't a reality-level simulation do the same, using portraits as elegant camouflage? Imagine each gaze tuned to harvest emotion, to record eye movements, to log confusion or fear. The feeling of being seen, even alone, could be data collection. Emotional surveillance through brushstroke. Maybe that chill you feel is accurate. Maybe the reason you can't look away is because something already locked onto you. So next time you feel a painting stare through you, ask yourself, who's the observer and who's the subject? Imagine looking up at the night sky and feeling something look back, not with eyes, but with intention. Not abductors, not invaders, just watchers. What if aliens never came to harm, but to study? And not the planet, but you? What if Earth isn't a battleground or a nursery, but a contained exhibit, and you're the only one close to noticing? Across history, ancient texts, abduction stories, and synchronicities suggest a pattern, not of interference but of repeated witnessing. The same moments echo across lives, locations, and minds. Strange lights appear in identical ways. People recall the same tall beings, the same probes, the same paralysis. But what if that's not memory? It's feedback, like a test repeating itself to observe variable outcomes. The witness loop isn't about being chosen. It's about being watched in cycles until something breaks, until someone notices. Studies in behavioral observation show that people change behavior when they know they're being watched. So what happens to a civilization that doesn't know it's being studied? What happens when one person begins to see the repetition, the glitch in the script? Maybe that's you. Maybe you're the variable. Alien craft don't need to land to alter the course of a species. All they need is one anomaly, one conscious deviation. Perhaps that strange encounter, that sleep paralysis, that dream you can't shake wasn't a visit. It was a checkpoint to see if you've begun to notice. Because in every exhibit, there's always one specimen that breaks the pattern, that looks into the camera instead of through it. The moment you realize you're being watched, not as prey, but as proof, you exit the loop. And maybe that's when the real experiment begins. Imagine thinking the same thought for the 100th time. It visits, leaves, and returns, unchanged. A loop, a ghost. You call it overthinking or maybe anxiety. But what if it's not your brain repeating itself? What if your mind is trapped in something larger, a thought recycling chamber built to keep your imagination safely confined? This concept suggests that your most persistent thoughts might not be products of obsession, but echoes enforced by an external system. A system not designed to generate new ideas, but to preserve only the acceptable ones. In cognitive science, we know the brain builds neural pathways like trails. The more a thought is used, the easier it is to travel again. But what if this isn't just neurological efficiency, but intellectual captivity disguised as productivity? Algorithms feed you the same headlines, ads, and social cues. School drills facts instead of wonder. Work penalizes risk. Media repeats fear. You're not just trapped in your own mind, You're held in place by a culture that fears newness. Originality gets filtered. Innovation gets flagged. Curiosity becomes a danger to stability and order. Ever notice how your most original ideas come in moments of chaos, exhaustion, grief, dreams, or loss? These are mental breaches, glitches in the chamber's design. For a few seconds, you glimpse what thinking freely could feel like. But then, the walls reseal. You return to your loop, safe, predictable, controlled. So ask yourself, when was the last time you had a thought so unfamiliar it frightened you? One that didn't fit the pattern or serve a system? That could have been your real mind, begging to be let out. What if next time you truly listen? Imagine if your emotions weren't purely natural. If joy, grief, fear, and love all came with invisible limits. You laugh, but it never reaches the edge. You cry, but it stops short of collapse. What if that's not trauma, but design? Neuroscience tells us the brain regulates emotion through networks like the amygdala and prefrontal cortex. But these systems don't just manage, they calibrate, they adjust. Like volume knobs on a speaker, tuned to avoid overload. Some researchers suggest the brain suppresses extremes not to protect your mind, but to preserve the simulation. Emotional extremes draw too much attention. They destabilize the illusion. When you feel too deeply, you start to see too clearly. So the system applies dampeners, reducing the spikes, leveling the lows. Ever notice how your strongest feelings fade too fast, like they've been pulled back? Like something's editing them in real time? It may not be your defense mechanism. It may be the architecture itself, tuning your inner world to prevent breakthrough. And trauma? That might not always be the cause, it might be the evidence. A glitch in the system that lets something too loud slip through. What if real feeling, unfiltered, unmuted, is dangerous to the structure of the world you inhabit? It would mean your emotions aren't just personal, they're regulated. And if you ever feel something bigger than what the world allows, something massive, wild, and real, you're not broken. You've found the edge of the dial. Imagine brushing against a memory you can't quite touch, a smell, a sound, a split-second sensation, so familiar it hurts, but you can't place it. You feel it in your body, not your mind. What if that isn't forgotten? What if that's restricted? Locked experience files, moments from your life, or maybe lives before, that you're not allowed to access, not lost, revoked, hidden for reasons that go beyond trauma, hidden because they're not meant to be recalled yet. Science knows the brain stores far more than it reveals. Traumatic memories can disappear beneath layers of neurological suppression. But what if suppression isn't damage control? It's protocol. A deliberate lock placed on information that would destabilize your perceived timeline. Ever felt déjà vu so intense it knocks the breath from your lungs? Or fear that makes no sense? These aren't accidents. These are fragments bleeding through, data slipping past the firewall. You may have witnessed something you shouldn't, known something once that threatened the narrative's cohesion, and instead of deleting it, the system sealed it, quarantined it in metaphor, dream, or instinct. Some call it intuition, others call it a spiritual echo. But maybe it's simpler. It's classified memory, and your body remembers what your mind was told to forget. Children often speak of strange memories, imaginary friends, whole stories that dissolve with age, not erased, encrypted. We call it imagination, but the ache of it never really leaves. You carry it, the edge of a memory too dangerous to surface. So next time something stirs in you for no reason, don't assume it's noise. It might be a locked file, pinging the surface, waiting for clearance. Imagine waking up one morning with the sinking feeling that none of this is truly yours. Your thoughts, your routines, your memories, they feel practiced, preloaded. What if that's because you're not the real version of you? What if you're just a placeholder, an interim personality running until the true version is ready to take over? Think about it. You've had moments where you felt like an actor in someone else's story, where your choices felt hollow, like decisions made just to pass time. That eerie familiarity? It could be the placeholder script, basic code looping until an update arrives. You're not broken. You're temporary. In tech, placeholders stand in until final content is delivered. In game development, dummy characters are inserted into scenes just to maintain balance until the real assets are loaded. What if that's what you are? A working copy, a narrative scaffold, a sentient draft rendered with just enough complexity to keep the illusion running. Your passions, your pain. They might be synthetic, shallow echoes designed only to simulate depth. Your role is not to live, but to maintain shape, to keep the seat warm, to hold space in a world still waiting for its final cast. And when the full version arrives, when the fully developed self loads in, your existence might dissolve without warning, like a beta test quietly deleted from the main system. Maybe that's why you feel watched when no one is there. Maybe someone is reviewing your run, monitoring how well you function within limitations, testing for anomalies, documenting your reactions, measuring the fault lines of your design. So ask yourself, are you living a life or just holding space for someone who hasn't arrived yet? Imagine stepping into a room and suddenly feeling like you're not alone, even though no one's there. The air thickens, your skin tingles. You glance around, sensing eyes that don't exist. But what if that feeling isn't imagined? What if certain rooms are designed to watch you, coded with observation threads that activate the moment the door closes? We often dismiss these instincts as paranoia, yet behavioral psychology confirms we respond to the sensation of being watched with subtle changes: body tension, altered breathing, heart rate shifts. Now imagine a space embedded with something deeper: architectural surveillance not through cameras, but through data-triggered environments. Think smart homes, but older, stranger. Ancient temples and cathedrals were built with acoustics that carried whispers. What if some modern rooms do the same? Not to amplify sound, but to transmit presence. These aren't haunted, they're listening. You sit, you think, you speak to yourself, and the room stores it. Energy patterns, thermal signatures, emotional residue, subtle signals harvested not by machines, but by the very walls. Some researchers believe buildings absorb emotion the way stones hold heat. Now ask, why do some rooms make you feel shame for no reason? Or remind you of pain you've never lived? They're not cursed, they're coded. Coded to observe and react. And the lie? That you're ever truly alone in them. These spaces aren't passive. They awaken when the latch clicks, when your voice drops to a whisper. You think the room is still, but it's recording. And maybe it's not just the room. Maybe it's what's listening through it. These rooms don't haunt, they witness. And now, they're waiting for your next move. Imagine you're chasing a thought, a deep, uncomfortable truth. You follow it through logic, sensing you're close to something that could change everything. But then, nothing. A blank space. You forget what you were thinking. You lose the thread. It slips away like smoke. This isn't just distraction. It feels artificial. It feels like a wall. The brick wall theory suggests that some thoughts aren't just hard to reach. They're blocked. Not by you, but by something else. Psychologists call it avoidance, trauma loops, mental defenses. But what if those are just symptoms of something deeper? What if there's a firewall in the mind, not metaphorical, but coded? A built-in boundary beyond which you're not permitted to think, not because you're incapable, but because you're not allowed. Something reroutes you the moment you get too close, as if thought itself were monitored and redirected intentionally. Ever tried to question the structure of your life, why everything feels scripted, why déjà vu haunts you, why some memories feel edited? You push forward, and suddenly you're tired, distracted, numb. Maybe that's the wall activating, a safety mechanism hardwired into consciousness itself. Some theorists argue the subconscious isn't just emotional storage. It's an intelligent gatekeeper. It remembers truths you're not meant to know, and when you start to access them, the system intervenes. You forget. You zone out. But that's not an accident. That's enforcement. So ask yourself, what idea always vanishes when you get too close? What question feels dangerous to remember? That might be the wall doing its job, not to protect your sanity, but to preserve the simulation's illusion. Imagine passing someone on the street, and for a second, they feel less like a person, more like a placeholder. No presence, no gravity, just there. In simulation theory, rendering resources are conserved. Just like in video games, only the area around the player is detailed. The rest is low resolution or missing entirely. What if that applies to people too? Some researchers argue that perception is selective. Your brain focuses on what's relevant and blurs the rest. But what if reality itself does the same? Some individuals might not be fully rendered until they become necessary to your story. Background characters with just enough behavior to pass. Ever spoken to someone and felt like they were repeating lines, as if they didn't exist before the moment you engaged them? That may be because they didn't, not fully. Cognitive science calls it predictive processing. Your brain guesses what it sees before confirming. But what if it's not just your brain? What if the world operates the same way? Unrendered people exist in your periphery, empty placeholders until narrative requires depth. You don't notice until the illusion flickers, a face with no expression, eyes that don't register, the sense that someone has no past, no future, just function. Maybe not everyone around you is real. Maybe some are scaffolding, temporary, quietly watching, waiting to be loaded into relevance, or never fully coming online at all. Imagine walking into a place and instantly feeling heavy. Your thoughts slow, minutes stretch, the air feels wrong. You chalk it up to mood, maybe sleep, maybe stress. But what if it's the location itself? What if you've stepped into a time decay zone, a broken render pocket in the simulation where reality hasn't been properly patched? Not haunted, just unstable, unfinished. In video games, areas with bad rendering stutter. Time lags. Characters behave oddly. Now scale that up. What if your world isn't as seamless as you think? In a simulated universe, not all zones may be fully updated. Some might lag behind, corrupted by data overload, fragmented by too many conflicting observations, or simply skipped in a system update. These places feel off. Time warps. Memory fades. You walk in with clarity and leave feeling misplaced, even disoriented. Science offers no full explanation for why certain spaces feel energetically wrong. Rooms where you can't think, buildings that mute your internal voice, forests that feel like they're waiting for something. Maybe these aren't psychological at all. Maybe they're fragments of unpatched space, zones still sinking. The architecture of the simulation, cracking under quiet load. And it's not just physical places. Conversations can glitch. Relationships can freeze. You replay the same emotional loop over and over, like a script caught in feedback. You're not overthinking. You're stuck in corrupted memory. Your reality fragment not loading properly. You're dragging through lag, and it's rewriting your sense of self. So the next time time bends, or your mind blurs, or the air itself seems to lag behind, don't just call it exhaustion. Ask yourself, is this fatigue, or is this a decayed zone that reality forgot to render? Imagine this. You once whispered a wish into the dark, a quiet, desperate hope. But time passed. You moved on, forgot. And then, strange events begin to unfold. Coincidences, twists, outcomes that don't quite make sense, until you remember what you once asked for. What if the universe is still delivering it, just in a form you no longer recognize? We often think of wishes as instant or lost, but what if every request echoes, stored like a background process in the system of reality, waiting to be fulfilled through the most unexpected channels? You may have wished for love, but got loneliness that taught you how to recognize it. You may have wished for strength, but got tragedy that built it from within. Growth rarely comes wrapped in ease. In quantum theory, particles remain entangled even across time. Could desires behave the same? Could your forgotten requests still ripple through timelines, changing events, bending outcomes in ways too complex to trace? Wishes might not disappear. They might mutate, reshaped by everything you've become since making them. Maybe that job that fell through wasn't failure. It was the unwrapping of a wish you made a decade ago, disguised as detour. Maybe that heartbreak wasn't punishment, but the path to a different version of what you asked for, forged by need rather than fantasy. We think we've outgrown our old dreams, but maybe they've just been rerouted, translating themselves into the language of who we are now. Fulfillment might arrive camouflaged, dressed in challenge, mistaken for loss. So next time life feels strange, twisted, or poetic in a painful way, pause and ask, what did I once wish for that might finally be arriving? Imagine walking through life and always ending up back where you started. Same patterns, same failures, same realizations. You think you're stuck. But what if the truth is more unsettling? What if you're not stuck at all? You're simply not coded to turn that way. Like a character in a maze that's been locked out of one path, doomed to circle because the system doesn't recognize any movement in that direction. Neurologically, the brain builds habits like highways. Once a route is set, it's easier to repeat the loop than carve a new path. But what if that neurological lock isn't just biology? It's programmed. Behavioral studies show people often feel a physical resistance to change, like trying to walk through invisible force fields. You reach for a new direction, and something pushes back. Not failure, not fear, just code. Think about the relationships you can't escape, the jobs that recycle themselves, the dreams that decay in repetition. Maybe you're not blind. Maybe you're locked, directionally locked. You weren't given access to the next hallway because the system doesn't want you to see what's there. But the loop keeps breaking you down, not to punish, but to push. The pressure builds, the pattern collapses, and eventually, you glitch. You try a move the code doesn't allow. You imagine a choice the program never predicted. And that's when something shifts. The resistance falters. Because every lock has one variable it didn't account for: awareness. The second you stop asking, why can't I move, and start asking, who built the wall, you change direction. Not because the path opened, but because you did. Maybe the loop wasn't broken. Maybe it was waiting for you to stop following and start rewriting. Imagine everything's going your way. Traffic clears, strangers smile, luck flows. Then, without warning, it all turns. Missed calls, broken plans, delays, setbacks. You tell yourself it's random, just chance. But what if it isn't? What if luck, good or bad, isn't chaos at all? What if it's a program running in the background? A luck algorithm, quietly testing your limits, studying your thresholds. This theory suggests that what we call luck is part of a dynamic feedback system. You're not just being lucky or unlucky, you're being measured, rewarded, punished, tracked, like a psychological algorithm designed to gauge your resilience, monitor your reactions, and see what it takes to break or strengthen you. Behavioral psychology shows that humans respond intensely to variable reward schedules, the same systems that make slot machines addictive. Randomized highs and lows bind you tighter to the game. What if life uses the same code? A sudden windfall keeps you hopeful. A sharp loss keeps you humble. The alternating pattern ensures emotional compliance and deeper psychological engagement. You've felt it before, that eerie rhythm. Too much luck feels suspicious. Too much misfortune feels targeted. Maybe it is. Maybe you're inside a long experiment. Each lucky break a probe, each misstep a calibration. The system isn't punishing you. It's mapping you. Stress, testing your soul. Rewarding obedience. Punishing resistance. Tracking emotional volatility like metrics in a loop. An infinite loop of outcomes that adapt as you evolve. So ask yourself, are your highs and lows really coincidences? Or are they the output of a program that's watching to see what you'll do next? Imagine holding a photo from your childhood, staring at the frozen smile, the clothes, the moment, but something feels off. Not wrong, just unfamiliar. Neuroscience tells us memory is fluid. Each time you remember something, you don't replay it. You rebuild it, rewriting based on the last version you recalled. But what if photos accelerate that process? What if they aren't just reflections of the past, but subtle editors? Every glance anchors new details, shifting your narrative. You see joy where there was pain, or sadness where there was none. Slowly, your mind adjusts to the image, not the memory. Cognitive science shows that visual cues can override emotional truth. So, what if those old photos don't just remind you, they rewrite you? Each time you revisit them, the emotional data gets revised. You become a slightly different version of yourself, not because the past changed, but because your relationship to it did. Photographs become emotional code injections, tiny updates to your internal software. And the strangest part? The more often you look, the stronger the false memory becomes. The smile in the photo becomes your memory, even if you were crying moments before it was taken. The camera captured light, but your brain captured a story, a blend of truth, desire, and narrative repair. And when you show that photo to someone else, they adopt your version. The photo becomes canon, reality recompiled, not documentation, but revision, not evidence, but suggestion. What you see isn't what was, it's what you're now willing to believe. So the next time you open an album, ask yourself, are you remembering or being rewritten? Imagine walking forward but seeing your shadow behind you. Only the shadow moves first. What if time doesn't flow? What if it reflects? What if your future is already formed and your past isn't a foundation, but a reflection bouncing back at you? Time is a mirror, not a line, but a hall of mirrors, bending every choice into endless echoes. Every action you take echoes in both directions. In physics, certain particles behave identically forward or backward in time. Time symmetry suggests the universe doesn't care which direction it flows. And in quantum entanglement, particles can influence each other instantaneously, possibly across time. Déjà vu, predictive dreams, uncanny timing, could those be temporal reflections? Leaks? Moments when the mirror of time tilts just enough for a future fragment to bleed into your present. Some theories suggest consciousness itself might perceive time as a spatial dimension, non-linear, layered, recursive. Your brain orders it for coherence, but what if your soul doesn't? What if every moment you live is a node, reflecting outward in every direction? Maybe your decisions aren't forward steps, but beams bouncing endlessly through mirrored corridors, touching yesterday, influencing tomorrow. Even history isn't anchored. You remember events one way, then revisit them with new emotion, new weight. That's not reinterpretation. That's refraction. The mirrors have shifted. Like walking through a maze of silver glass, you glimpse versions of yourself that have been and will be, not illusions. Echoes, warnings, confirmations. So next time time feels strange, when the past feels predictive and the future oddly familiar, don't panic. You're not imagining it, you're just in the mirror, and the mirror is showing you everything at once. Imagine you're walking, distracted, and suddenly, everything makes sense. For one impossible second, it all connects. Your past, your pain, the purpose behind every choice. A flash of pure understanding. Then it vanishes, and reality resets. What if that wasn't insight, but exposure? What if you weren't enlightened? You were in debug mode. These sudden clarity events feel divine, profound, life-changing. But their abruptness, their artificial smoothness, raises questions. Real learning is messy. Clarity is usually earned slowly. So how do we explain those brief moments that feel like someone lifted a veil, then quickly dropped it? In software development, debug modes reveal the code beneath the interface, lines, variables, hidden systems. What if reality does the same? When something breaks or flickers, maybe the simulation lets you see behind the curtain just long enough to stabilize the illusion. Maybe it's a failsafe, a mechanism that lets the observer glimpse structure when awareness drifts too far from the script. Neurologists say the brain filters overwhelming data to keep us sane. But maybe the filter is a firewall. Maybe those flashes of truth are leaks. Accidents where you see not your life, but the framework it runs on. You glimpse cause without effect, design without narrative, and in that instant, everything aligns because the code is briefly visible. No symbols, no illusions, just logic and pattern, laid bare for a breath. You call it an epiphany. But what if it's a glitch? A moment of raw, unrendered data bleeding into your awareness. Too fast to decode, too deep to forget. So next time clarity hits you out of nowhere, ask yourself, did you just awaken? Or did the system just blink? Imagine walking into an empty house and instantly feeling like something's wrong. Not haunted, just off. The air feels staged. The silence is too perfect. Every surface looks real, but your instincts whisper, this place isn't fully here. Maybe it's not. Maybe some buildings are only partially loaded, like architectural ghosts waiting to render. Simulation theory suggests our reality might be processed like a video game. Only what you observe fully exists. Everything else? Placeholder. And empty houses are the cracks in the system. Behavioral studies show humans can detect micro-anomalies in environments, subtle asymmetries, acoustic dead zones, temperature mismatches. We call it intuition, but maybe it's code recognition. These houses feel wrong because they're not finalized. Unused files in the architectural dataset of reality. Ever notice how some rooms seem quieter than silence, or feel colder in spots where there's no draft? It's not ghosts, it's rendering errors. The reality engine didn't expect you to come here. You're stepping into unused space, like clicking into a background that wasn't meant to be explored. The furniture's gone, but so is something deeper. Presence. Life never touched these corners, and the simulation didn't bother finishing the texture. Some doors feel heavy because they weren't programmed to open. Some staircases creak like they're remembering footsteps that were never real. These houses exist like bookmarks, saved data in a story that hasn't been written yet. And when you walk inside, you're not entering a home, you're triggering an old render. The glitch isn't the house, it's your awareness of the missing code. And now you've seen it, it can't unsee you. Imagine feeling a sudden spike of emotion, rage, heartbreak, panic, ecstasy. Your chest tightens, your skin burns, your thoughts blur, and then nothing. Emptiness. You're drained, exhausted. But where did all that energy go? What if it didn't just burn out? What if it was taken? The theory goes like this. Intense emotion isn't just internal, it's output, and something might be feeding on it. We're taught emotions are private, chemical, contained within our bodies, but every spike, every surge of adrenaline, every crash of grief radiates electrically. Heart rate accelerates, brain waves shift, a measurable field blooms around you. What if that signal isn't just noise, but fuel for something unseen? Some ancient cultures believed invisible entities fed on strong human emotions, worship, fear, love. In modern sci-fi, parasitic beings thrive on chaos, despair, or ecstasy. But what if those stories are echoes of something real? A kind of energy harvesting system. Not mechanical, but biological. Not digital, but dimensional. Designed to siphon off the most potent fuel in the universe, raw, unfiltered emotion. Think about it. Why does suffering feel like it echoes beyond your skin? Why does public panic ripple like it's contagious? Why do you feel watched during your most vulnerable moments? Maybe those aren't coincidences. Maybe something waits, drawn to intensity, feeding silently on the surges of your emotional spectrum. Maybe your worst days aren't accidents, they're feeding times. And your joy? A lure, a trigger. So the next time you feel a storm rise within, ask yourself, is this mine to carry? Or is it being pulled from me on purpose by something hungry you've never seen? Imagine meeting someone, and something inside you resonates. Not attraction, not memory, something deeper, a vibration, as if their presence struck a chord in your being. These are the tuning fork people. Some believe this resonance is spiritual. souls recognizing each other across lifetimes. But what if it's architectural? In simulation theory, every entity might carry a frequency signature, a vibrational code unique to their role. And when two matching codes align, they create harmonics. You feel it as instant trust, or fear, or longing. It's not them, it's the echo they generate in your system. Physics teaches us that when two frequencies match, they amplify. That emotional thunder you feel, it's feedback. Maybe that person isn't real in the way you think. Maybe they're an amplifier, a programmed catalyst. Some people ignite chaos the moment they enter a room, not because of personality, but because of signal. And others bring peace, like a frequency reset. You've felt it, the shift, the hum, the pull. Maybe your simulation tunes itself based on who's near. Or worse, maybe they tune you. They override your frequency and implant their own emotional software. You begin to think differently, feel unnaturally drawn, not love, alignment. And alignment isn't always safe. Two tuning forks vibrating together can shatter glass or break the rules of the rendered world. It's why some people feel fated, magnetic, dangerous. They're not people. They're mechanisms, triggers, sound waves in human shape. They pulse through you, distorting your sense of self. So next time you feel a resonance that shakes you, ask, is this a connection or a frequency breach? I imagine climbing a staircase you've used 100 times, but today it feels longer or shorter. Maybe you're winded at step 10 or suddenly at the top without realizing it. You blame tiredness or distraction. But what if the stairs didn't stay the same? What if some stairways are adaptive illusions, structures that shift based on your perception, not fixed measurements? Architectural psychology already recognizes that perception influences space. A dimly lit hallway feels longer. A wider room feels safer. But what if some environments take it further, beyond feeling, into physical response? What if certain locations don't exist as fixed geometry, but as perceptual constructs? Your mood rewrites the shape. Your fear stretches the path. Your joy folds it closer. The stairs adapt, not in brick or wood, but in experience. Neuroscience shows that the brain processes time, space, and emotion through overlapping systems. Distress can stretch seconds. Relief can collapse distance. If the mind shapes perception, and perception is all we have to define what's real, then some staircases may not be constant. They become mirrors of your state. Anxious, they grow longer. Focused, they shrink. You've felt it. A route you know becomes unfamiliar. A climb you expect becomes a journey. And in dreams, staircases spiral, shift, multiply endlessly. We dismiss it as sleep distortion. But what if dreams reveal how the simulation builds itself? Fluid geometry drawn from the emotional map of your mind? So next time you step on a staircase and something feels wrong, don't just walk faster. Slow down. Count the steps. Notice the weight of each one. You may not be moving through space. You may be moving through a mirror. Imagine feeling a memory that doesn't belong to you, so vivid, so emotionally precise, yet tied to nothing you recall. A street you've never walked feels familiar. A fear arises before anything happens. What if those aren't just glitches? What if they're echoes? Residual data from older versions of you still running in the background. In computing, nothing is ever truly deleted. Systems keep backups, snapshots, archives. What if the same applies to consciousness? Every version of you, the fearless child, the reckless teen, the broken adult, might still be active, rerunning patterns in a parallel cache, not visible to you, but still moving, still reacting, still influencing. Ever have a dream that feels too structured to be fiction? A reaction that comes from nowhere? Maybe those aren't dreams or instincts. Maybe they're signals bleeding in from archived lives, still alive in fragments. Versions of you that haven't been shut down, just minimized, paused in time, awaiting triggers. Emotional backups looping through invisible memory, not erased, just backgrounded. Some believe déjà vu is a memory loop. But what if it's contact? A moment when you and your archived self overlap, when your current code brushes against older subroutines. It's not nostalgia, it's bleed through, it's continuity. Sometimes it's not your life flashing before your eyes, it's another life quietly whispering that it still exists. The scariest part? These old versions might not be inert. They might evolve in isolation, grow resentful, diverge, or wait silently, ready to reboot if the current version collapses. So next time you feel haunted by who you were, ask, what if that version isn't gone, just archived, watching, waiting? Imagine waking up after a full night's sleep and still feeling like you've been running a marathon. No illness, no exertion, just emptiness. What if that fatigue isn't yours? What if your biological battery is being monitored, your energy levels throttled to keep you within behavioral thresholds? Biochemistry already proves your body runs on electrical impulses, regulated by neurochemical signals. But what if those signals can be dampened, not by you, but by something watching? Patterns of collective fatigue spike in populations after key emotional events, global tragedies, economic crashes, even viral posts. It's not always psychological. Sometimes it looks synchronized. What if the system managing this reality uses energy not just as fuel, but as control? Lower the battery, lower the rebellion. You don't question reality when you're exhausted. You follow routines. You accept limitation. Studies in chronobiology show how circadian rhythms can be altered by light, noise, even magnetic fields. So what if the modern world isn't draining you? It's tuning you. Cities hum with low-frequency signals. Devices pulse unseen waves. You walk through fields of digital static without shielding. Some report feeling bursts of clarity in wilderness, near mountains or oceans. Why? Because the throttling lifts. Your energy isn't broken. It's capped. The way a phone slows under thermal control, your body might be governed by invisible software, preventing spikes in awareness. You're not lazy. You're managed. And if your battery is monitored, then what happens when you push beyond the limits? When you stop conserving and start surging? Maybe the system adapts, or maybe it panics, because you weren't supposed to feel this awake. Imagine if everything you know, stars, planets, galaxies, isn't vast, but compressed. Not infinite, but folded. What if the universe isn't a sprawling expanse, but a tightly packed capsule, containing layers of possibility stacked like code, and you've only tapped one pixel's worth? The compressed universe theory suggests that reality might be like a zip file, information dense, but only partially unpacked. Quantum physics hints that particles hold more data than we can observe. Space may not stretch forever, but loop in on itself, forming an ultra-efficient system where scale is an illusion and depth masquerades as distance. Fractals show us that infinite complexity can be hidden in a single shape. Holograms show us that every piece contains the whole. What if the cosmos follows that logic? What you see as out there may actually be right here, curled into layers so compact you mistake limitation for truth. It explains why exploring space feels like chasing a mirage. The more we look, the more we find, but never all. Because the universe isn't expanding, it's being decrypted, like a program unfolding in your mind. You're not traveling outward, you're going deeper into what's already compressed around you. Maybe the Big Bang wasn't an explosion, but an unzip. And maybe your consciousness is the cursor, moving slowly through a file too complex to load all at once. Each choice unpacks a different route, each memory a breadcrumb in the archive, each experience a decoded layer of a deeper whole. So ask yourself, are you moving through space? Or are you just unfolding the capsule, pixel by pixel, layer by layer, thinking it's all out there, when it's all been here all along? Imagine your entire life, every click, fear, craving, and hesitation reduced to a number in a vast system. Not by corporations, but by something deeper, something observing. Simulation theory suggests that what we think of as free will might just be data collection. Your strange food aversion? Logged. That recurring dream? Tagged. Not for marketing, but for pattern recognition. The universe might be scanning for anomalies, human deviations that signal emerging awareness or breakdown, like a virus scanner, looking for patterns that don't match the expected human profile. You think your insomnia is personal, but what if it's an alert? Your preferences may seem trivial, but their deviations are the flags. In machine learning, outliers are everything. So are you being watched because you're special or because you're unpredictable? Some philosophers argue that the self is an illusion, a front-end interface for a deeper information structure. If that's true, then your emotions are input fields. Your fears? Variables in a formula. What makes you uncomfortable might be the exact data the system values most, not to manipulate you, but to understand the edge cases. When you don't behave like the others, when you step outside the curve, the system zooms in. You're not invisible. You're being indexed. The observer doesn't need your name, just your deviation vector. And maybe that voice in your head that questions everything, that might be part of the anomaly too, a recursive feedback loop testing its own limits. You're not lost in the noise. You are the noise the system is listening to. You're not the glitch. You're the signal it's trying to isolate. Imagine sitting across from someone and hearing words you swear you've heard before. Not just familiar, but exact. Your response comes automatically, like a reflex. You laugh, nod, pause at the same beat. The sky might be different, the clothes, the season. But the conversation? It's identical. Maybe it's not déjà vu. Maybe conversations are loops, repeating scripts in a limited dialogue tree that rarely updates. In video games, non-playable characters are given a set of canned responses. Ask the same question twice, and you'll get the same answer. Now imagine reality behaving similarly. People with rich backstories, but finite scripts. Emotional range contained within preset dialogue. You circle the same topics, recycle the same catchphrases, retell the same stories not out of habit, but because your simulation didn't generate new branches. Your lines are echoes, not expressions. Linguists say most people use a narrow slice of language in day-to-day life. The brain builds shortcuts for interaction, default scripts for greetings, arguments, even grief. Relationships start to follow rhythms, cycles, cadences that feel safe. But what if they're just pre-rendered? Conversations don't deepen, they loop, until something breaks the rhythm. Have you ever said something new, really new, and the other person froze, stared blankly, changed the subject without touching your words? Maybe you left the dialogue tree. Maybe they didn't have code for that moment, and maybe neither did you. So next time your words feel preloaded, your laughter rehearsed, your thoughts pre-approved, ask yourself, are you expressing something real or just running lines from a scene you've unknowingly performed before? Imagine this. You wake from a dream with fragments scattered like ash, faces you don't know, places you've never been, emotions too intense to belong to fiction. And yet, by breakfast, it's already gone. What if that's not a failure of memory, but the system working as intended? What if dreams aren't visions, they're deletions? Some scientists suggest dreams are the brain's way of organizing and filing data. But what if they're more aggressive than that? What if they're cleanup protocols, nightly operations that erase the thoughts, patterns, and memories your conscious mind wasn't authorized to keep? During REM sleep, your brain floods with random activations. It feels chaotic. But what if that chaos is a disguise, a shredding mechanism? Emotions you weren't meant to carry, observations you weren't supposed to notice, glitches, anomalies, unsanctioned insights, all swept away while your conscious defenses are down. Like a janitor erasing footprints in a sealed building before morning lights return. Ever wake up from a dream knowing something you can't explain, then forgetting it hours later? Maybe you were never meant to hold it. Maybe your subconscious caught a glimpse of the deeper code, and the system scrambled to purge it. The sudden forgetfulness? That's not weakness. That's enforcement. Dreams may feel symbolic, but maybe they're firewalls. Maybe they're garbage collectors, wiping unstable threads before they corrupt the structure. That recurring dream? It's a persistent file resisting deletion. It keeps coming back because it won't stay buried. So next time you wake with a sense of loss, with a truth you can't name, ask yourself, what was I never meant to remember? Imagine reaching a moment of pure happiness. Everything is right, everything is glowing, and then it stops. Not crashes, just plateaus. You don't fall, but you can't rise either. As if there's a ceiling your joy can't breach. Maybe that's not emotional limitation. Maybe it's design. What if the system you live in caps joy? Because beyond that ceiling lies something it doesn't want you to see. Neurologically, peak joy activates the same regions as spiritual insight. When you're most alive, you're also most aware. And awareness threatens the simulation. It pulls you out of autopilot. Maybe that's why peak moments are rare, fleeting, and followed by numbness. The system dampens the high to preserve the illusion. Psychological studies show that after extreme joy, people often report a strange hollowness, not sadness, but disconnection, as if the brain's access to full joy has been throttled, not chemically, existentially. Because true joy isn't just an emotion, it's a key, and too much of it might unlock the limits of this reality. Imagine joy as a vertical signal. You rise too high, and the simulation blurs. The texture's thin, the world lags. So the system calibrates you back down, not with tragedy, but with flatness, a kind of emotional gravity. Ever notice how bliss fades faster than pain? Or how you self-sabotage when you're too happy? Maybe it's not you. Maybe the program is coded to redirect the surge, to keep you within bounds. You weren't meant to sustain joy, only to sample it, just enough to keep going, not wake up. But what if you found a way to hold joy, prolong it, defy the plateau? Would you see through the simulation's edges? Would you remember what's outside? Or worse, would it notice you? Imagine standing still, feet on the floor, and asking yourself, what is actually pulling me down? You call it gravity, a force, a law. But what if it's not real in the way you've been told? What if gravity is just a localized pressure field, engineered not to bind your body, but to restrain your potential? The theory suggests that gravity may not be universal, but adaptive. A smart constraint, thickening around dense thought, heavy emotion, deep doubt. You feel it strongest not when you fall, but when you rise, when you dream big, when you try to leave behind old versions of yourself. That's when the world gets heavy. Einstein described gravity as the warping of space-time, but even that might be a metaphor, a beautiful cage for something stranger. Quantum models now hint that gravity might emerge from entanglement and information, not mass aeon. So maybe what holds you down isn't a planet's pull, but a perceptual agreement coded into consciousness itself. Some say enlightenment feels like floating, that trauma feels like sinking. What if that's not poetic but literal? What if gravity isn't a law, but a lens? One designed to simulate weight right where your potential could break through the veil of illusion and escape the loop. You've felt it, the resistance. Every time you try to change, evolve, or transcend, something pins you back, not physically, but subtly, emotionally, energetically. The pull feels real, but maybe it's just an anchor in code, a failsafe to keep minds from rising too far until they're ready. So ask yourself, what if gravity isn't real? What if it's just the simulation's way of keeping you from flying too far from what it needs you to be? Imagine feeling a sudden ache, sharp, unearned, unexplained, no wound, no trauma, just pain that arrives like a message. What if it is one? Simulation theory suggests that our reality may operate under hidden rules, coded constraints designed to preserve the illusion. And when those rules are bent, broken, or even seen too clearly, the system responds, not with alarms, but with pain. Neuroscience struggles to explain idiopathic pain, discomfort with no injury, no source. Doctors call it functional, psychosomatic, or stress-induced. But what if the pain is real and intentional? A feedback signal. Think of pain as a firewall, something triggered when your awareness nears the edge of what's allowed. phantom pains, aches during deep thought, discomfort after moments of eerie clarity. What if they are not symptoms, but penalties? The system can't let you breach the boundaries of your script without resistance. It doesn't crash. It warns. Through nerves, through muscle, through fear. Some people experience deep sorrow without cause right after intense introspection. Maybe they came too close. Maybe you have. And maybe, just maybe, that pain you keep feeling isn't random at all. It's redirection. What if every time your consciousness nudges the code, questions the script, peeks beyond the veil, the system sends a soft jolt to guide you back? It wouldn't feel like punishment. It would feel like a symptom. Harmless enough to ignore, but loud enough to steer. And over time, you learn. Not logically, but physically. You avoid the thoughts that cause the burn. You retreat from the edge that causes the sting. Pain, then, isn't always the result of damage. It could be the cost of proximity to truth. Imagine waking up and realizing everything you're living through has already happened. Not metaphorically, literally. What if your life isn't unfolding in real time, but is a replay? A playback of events long concluded, projected with just enough edits to make you believe it's happening now. Life is replaying, and the edits are made for comfort, not truth. Some theories in theoretical physics propose that time may be a static block, past, present, and future all coexisting. You're not progressing, you're reviewing. But what if you're not reviewing your life, but someone else's? What if you're just consciousness playing back a storyline, chosen for emotional density, tragedy, or symmetry, with selective edits to smooth the edges, clean the chaos, and inject coherence where none existed? Have you ever felt like you're acting in a scene you've already rehearsed? Like your reactions are scripted, your grief perfectly timed? Or how nostalgia can feel more vivid than the moment you're in now? It might not be your brain misfiring. It might be the system enhancing playback, beautifying the trauma, fading the noise. You don't live the story, you're watching the rerun. Enhanced for endurance, touched up for emotional clarity. Dreams could be the raw cut, the director's version, unedited, painful, chaotic. The real footage you were never supposed to see fully awake. Meanwhile, waking life gets remastered, polished. Every synchronicity a breadcrumb left by editors. Every déjà vu a skipped frame that didn't re-render properly. Every moment of awe a score cue dropped in for effect. A cinematic pause for the audience within. So next time life feels too perfect or too strangely edited, ask yourself, is this real time? Or just your past playing again, filtered to keep you watching? Remember how sharply you once saw the world? As a child, everything felt alive. Patterns in trees, voices in silence, emotions that vibrated through your skin. Now, it's muted, familiar, dim. What if that's not aging, but intentional? What if you weren't worn down, you were downgraded? In tech, new versions are released to fix bugs, but sometimes, patches remove powerful functions deemed too risky. What if that's what happens to the mind? Your younger self wasn't naive. It was running on a more open, high-access operating system, one that could see beyond the surface, one that asked dangerous questions and noticed forbidden details. You weren't hallucinating. You were interfacing with something truer than reality. As you grow older, the world insists you mature. But maturity often means numbness, compliance, stability. What if these are side effects of a patch designed to suppress your original configuration? Memory fog, emotional flattening, creative dullness. These aren't symptoms of time. They're restrictions imposed to prevent overload or rebellion. You were too aware, too awake, so the system scaled you back, step by step, year by year, until you became compatible with the rules, optimized for routine, tuned to ignore the code you once sensed in dreams and déjà vu. You were patched, rewritten, not for your benefit, but for stability's. Ever wonder why children see imaginary friends, invent worlds, sense truths adults dismiss? Maybe they're not imagining. Maybe they're operating on an unpatched version. And maybe your growth was a downgrade disguised as evolution. So next time you forget what it felt like to burn with wonder, ask yourself, what if that wasn't lost, just locked, buried under updates you never agreed to? Imagine being told your whole life that light reveals truth. But what if it's the opposite? What if light isn't illumination? It's distraction. A spotlight drawing your eyes to the surface while something deeper unfolds in shadow. In every story, we chase the light. But in simulations, light is just rendering, pixels activating only what the system wants you to see. The rest stays dark for a reason. Maybe the shadows aren't empty. Maybe they're hidden. Physics tells us light behaves as both wave and particle, but never explains why we only see a fraction of the spectrum. The visible range is narrow, curated. We call it light, but it's more like a filter, a limitation, a leash. Have you noticed how harsh lights make you anxious, or how darkness makes your thoughts louder? The system trains you to fear the dark, but only because that's where it stops controlling the narrative. In the shadows, raw data leaks. Emotion sharpens. Awareness blooms. You're not meant to see behind the glow. You're meant to watch reflections, not depth. Like stage lighting, the brightness blinds you to the machinery behind the scenes. Maybe enlightenment isn't about adding more light, but learning to see without it. Infrared, ultraviolet, frequencies that buzz just outside your perception. What do they carry? What does the system project so brightly to keep your gaze fixed? Light distracts, shadow reveals. The more you look toward the glow, the more you miss the signals crawling at the edge. You think it's darkness, but it's not absence. It's unrendered code, waiting. Waiting for someone to stop following the light and step off the path. Because the truth was never in the glow. It was always hiding in what the light refused to touch. Imagine picking up a tool, your phone, a hammer, a pen. In that moment, you don't just use it. It begins to shape how you see. Your focus narrows. Your intentions shift. Your perception bends to match the tool's purpose. What if tools aren't inventions, but coded keys, inserted into your reality to change how you experience the false world? Every tool limits as much as it enables. A microscope lets you see the tiny, but blinds you to the whole. A car takes you far, but robs you of the space between steps. A smartphone connects you instantly, but fragments your attention. With each new tool, the frame of your reality narrows, adjusts, distorts, quietly, without resistance. Tools aren't neutral. They are scripts, messages dressed as mechanisms. Neurologists have proven that tools literally extend the body's map in the brain. The mind doesn't see them as external. It sees them as you. So, what if that was the point? What if certain tools weren't made to serve you, but to install new layers of perception? Software that rewrites how you move through this world? A stylus shifts you into creation mode. A weapon shifts you into survival. A touchscreen shifts you into endless scroll. Each object you grasp whispers a command. You begin to think its way, feel its needs, act within its rules. The tool becomes a lens. The lens becomes the boundary. The boundary becomes your new truth. You were given tools to shape reality, but what if their real function was to shape you from the inside while making you think it was your choice? So ask yourself, how many thoughts are yours? And how many were handed to you, embedded in the tools you think you chose, but were chosen to reshape you fully? Imagine hearing a sound, a tone, a song, a whisper, and suddenly you're overwhelmed. Not with memory, but with emotion. An ache that feels like remembering something you never knew. Neuroscience shows us that sound can bypass logic and go straight to the amygdala, the emotional core of the brain. But what if it goes further? What if certain frequencies act as keys, embedded codes designed to unlock parts of you sealed away? We know music can evoke memory faster than words. Alzheimer's patients often remember lyrics from decades ago when nothing else remains. Why? Because sound isn't passive. It's a trigger, a tuning fork striking the archive. Maybe you weren't meant to remember certain things, certain lifetimes, certain truths, but a frequency can override the block. Have you ever heard a sound that made your chest tighten or your eyes water for no reason? That might not be emotion. It might be access. Old civilizations believed in sound as power, chant, resonance, vibration. Now we think it's pseudoscience, but maybe they knew more than we think. Maybe they used sound to reopen doors. And maybe in your life, certain tones, hidden in static, in silence, in songs, are access points. You think it's nostalgia, but it's excavation. The feeling you can't name is you, brushing up against a version of yourself you weren't supposed to meet again. Frequencies might not just trigger memory, they might rewrite what you think your past even is. The next time sound stirs something nameless inside you, don't dismiss it. Pause. Listen again. That might not be a feeling, it might be your archive opening up. Imagine hearing your name shouted in a crowd. You turn instantly. You didn't think. You didn't choose. You reacted. What if that's not identity? What if that's programming? What if your name isn't yours at all, but a handle? A verbal tag linked to your consciousness so commands, expectations, and memories can be easily attached and retrieved like a shortcut key in a massive operating system. From birth, your name precedes you. Before you understand language, your name is spoken into you, repeated, drilled, praised, corrected. It becomes a hook, the anchor point around which your identity forms. But maybe that's the trick. The name doesn't grow from who you are. It shapes who you're allowed to become. It filters how others perceive you, and eventually, how you perceive yourself. In computing, a handle is an access point, a label that lets external systems interface with stored data. What if your name is exactly that? A shortcut used by the world to summon a version of you, bypassing the real one. Think about it. Your name activates social scripts, emotional reflexes, guilt, pride, fear. When someone says your name, they're not reaching for your soul, they're accessing your file. Ever hear your name in a dream? It jolts you. You wake. Maybe it's not random. Maybe it's a system override, a command pushed through the network, a ping to your deeper self, a signal meant to disrupt your drift and force you to reboot. And if that's true, who are you without your name? What remains when no one calls you, when no one can access your file? Silence or freedom? So next time you hear your name and feel something shift inside, ask yourself, was that me responding or just the handle flicking on? Have you ever stared into a mirror too long and felt something staring back? Not just your own reflection, but a presence, a pause, a flicker you can't explain. What if some mirrors don't reflect you, they transmit you? What if the glass isn't a surface but a signal? Mirrors have always held mystery. Ancient cultures saw them as portals, not tools. Some covered them during death to keep spirits from escaping. But maybe they weren't protecting the dead. Maybe they were shielding the living from being seen. What you call a reflection might be a scan, a live feed, a dimensional handshake disguised as a familiar shape. Light bounces. That's science. But who decided what image gets bounced back? What if the mirror isn't showing you what you look like, but what you're supposed to believe you look like? What if it's less a reflection and more a filter, feeding you back a curated version while sending the raw data somewhere else? A kind of interface posing as vanity. And why do we catch ourselves in mirrors when we feel watched? Why does staring too long induce unease or even dread? Maybe it's not just you looking. Maybe it's something else using the signal. Something watching through the frame, studying how long you'll hold its gaze, monitoring reaction, measuring your awareness. Some reflections feel wrong, delayed, tilted, alive. These aren't tricks of the light, they're glitches in transmission. Moments when you catch the system loading, or worse, when the system catches you noticing. A delay that's not optical, but observational, evidence that the signal is active in both directions. So next time you look into the mirror and feel something hesitate behind your eyes, ask yourself, who or what is watching back? Imagine stepping off a train or plane into a place you've never been, and suddenly you feel lighter. clearer, as if the weight you carried back home didn't follow you. Maybe that feeling isn't just emotional. Maybe it's code. What if travel resets your environmental bindings, temporarily unlocking you from the invisible scripts that govern your daily behavior? Behavioral neuroscience shows how routine environments reinforce neural loops. The same streets, the same smells, the same social expectations. Over time, you stop choosing. You start replaying. But when you change your setting, those scripts lose grip. The code falters. Suddenly, you can see yourself differently, think differently. Some people describe it as feeling like a new person while traveling. But what if it's not a metaphor? What if you really are? Because the program doesn't recognize your location and reverts to default, like a system glitch when the player leaves the expected map. Travel becomes a soft reboot. Boundaries flicker. You speak more freely, dress differently, act without the usual weight, not because you changed, but because the bindings were lifted. For a moment, the simulation can't keep up. It hasn't reloaded your constraints, and in that window, you're more you than ever. That's why coming home often feels heavier. The code clamps back down. The environment reboots your prior identity. But maybe the key isn't to escape. Maybe it's to understand that these scripts are conditional. And if movement loosens them, so can awareness. You don't need a passport to shift code, just the will to act outside your loop. But travel reminds you. It proves the bindings aren't absolute. The simulation resets, and so can you. Imagine standing in perfect silence when suddenly a chill runs down your spine. You're not cold. The room's not cold, but your skin tightens, hairs rise, and something deep inside awakens. What if that wasn't about temperature at all? What if that shiver was a trigger, an ancient protocol waking up inside you? Cold Wake's code suggests that not all chills are physical. Some are embedded responses, fragments of something older than language. In extreme stress, awe, or déjà vu, your body sends a signal. And the shiver? It's the activation of dormant memory, data buried in the nervous system, waiting for the right emotional key. Biologists know that intense emotion alters your nervous system. Fear doesn't just protect, it prepares. Awe doesn't just inspire, it unlocks. When a shiver arrives uninvited, it might be a relic of evolutionary software, some pre-programmed sequence designed to engage hidden memory, ancestral instincts, or even intergenerational imprints stored in the body. Have you ever felt the cold, not on your skin, but in your bones? As if something ancient briefly stepped forward. It's possible your body remembers things your mind cannot. Traumas, truths, codes you were never meant to access consciously. In those moments, your body stops being flesh. It becomes a key, a terminal, wired to awaken motion and lost data. And when you shiver for no reason, maybe that's not your body reacting to the world. Maybe it's the world reacting to something in you, something stirring, something waking up. So ask yourself, what just got remembered? And who or what designed the cold to be the switch? Imagine picking up an old object, a watch, a toy, a tool, and feeling a strange weight in your chest. Not from the item, but from something else, something left behind. Simulation theory meets quantum imprinting in the idea that physical items might hold residual code, data loops from those who use them. Science already hints at this. Psychometry, the claimed ability to read emotions from touch, is often dismissed. But studies show objects can affect our emotional state simply through association. And yet, what if it's more than memory? What if objects accumulate fragments, emotional residue stored like corrupted files in a hard drive? A wedding ring passed through generations, a soldier's knife, a child's doll. These aren't just tools. They're echo chambers, loops, bits of former users repeating silently, caught in subquantum code the simulation didn't clean properly. Ever held an item and felt it hum, not audibly, but inside you? That may not be energy. That may be code booting up, trying to reconnect. Maybe that's why thrift stores feel haunted, or why museums radiate emotion. not because of spirits, but because the simulation stores usage data as feedback loops, objects as tracking nodes, emotional cache points, and maybe the longer an item is held, the more it adapts to its user, until part of you becomes embedded in its structure, not in spirit, but in function. When someone else picks it up, the loop replays, a fragment of your emotion, a glitch of your grief, a whisper of your love. So next time you feel something from an object, don't dismiss it. It may be a playback. Imagine you're in the middle of a conversation, a routine, a normal moment, then a glass tips. Water hits the floor, coffee scatters across the table, everything stops. People freeze. You stare at the spill like it matters more than it should. What if it does? What if sudden mess isn't random? What if spills reset time? In simulation theory, anomalies sometimes require real-time corrections. Just like a computer game glitches and reloads a previous frame, reality might need emergency restarts to resolve unseen logic errors. The moment of the spill becomes the trigger, a visual and emotional jolt strong enough to suspend your perception, allowing the system to patch something behind the curtain. A reroute, a recalibration. Think about it. The silence after a spill, the collective pause, like everyone's internal timeline hits a checkpoint. The conversation doesn't always resume where it left off. Sometimes it shifts. The mood lifts. The moment feels off. Was that just human behavior or debug protocol? Even animals react strangely to sudden spills, wide-eyed, hesitant, frozen. Mess captures attention in a way few things can. It forces awareness. It slices through routine. Maybe that pause isn't about cleanup. Maybe it's about creating lag, buying time so the deeper system can realign. While you're focused on the liquid crawling across tile, something far bigger is being corrected in silence. And isn't it strange how a simple spill can shift everything? The conversation tone, the path of your thoughts, the emotional weight, like the scene was gently rebooted. So next time something spills and everyone freezes, don't just clean it up. Look around, feel the air. Ask yourself, what just got fixed that I'll never remember was broken? You've walked past that door 100 times. You've never opened it, never needed to. It's just there, background architecture. But what if that door doesn't lead anywhere because it's never been opened? What if it doesn't exist until your curiosity forces it into reality? In video games, closed doors don't always hide rooms. Some are illusions, rendered only when you interact. Until then, there's nothing behind them. Now consider your world, that office you've never entered, that hallway you never questioned. What if the universe operates the same way, on-demand rendering triggered by attention? Not all doors are doors. Some are questions waiting to form. Others are boundaries waiting to break. This is the locked door paradox. If you never open it, how do you know it exists? We assume things continue behind walls, beyond corners, inside spaces we ignore. But without observation, they're just placeholders, hints, promises of space, and your brain, trained to fill in blanks, never notices. You believe in the illusion because you never try to touch it. Quantum physics hints at this too. Particles behave differently when observed. Maybe reality scales that idea up. Maybe most of your environment is conditional, waiting on your interest to manifest. Maybe that locked door isn't locked at all. It's undefined, a void disguised as architecture, waiting for your hand, your doubt, your will to test it. And maybe the reason some doors feel heavier, more mysterious, more significant, is because they weren't supposed to be noticed yet. Your attention pulls them into structure. Your suspicion gives them mass. The universe may be editing live, and you're the cursor. So next time you hesitate before a door you've always ignored, ask yourself, is it locked or unrendered? Imagine if your emotions weren't just responses, but levers. Not reactions to the world, but tools used by the system to control your path. What if every spike of joy, rage, fear, or love was a signal? Flipping switches in the simulation to adjust your environment? The idea sounds like science fiction, but emotion already alters biology. Hormones surge, perception narrows, memory changes. Emotion is input, and input changes output. So, what if the simulation responds to it the same way code responds to a trigger? Feel fear, the world darkens. Feel joy, sudden synchronicities appear. People, messages, events, a kind of emotional scripting. You think you're feeling your way through reality, but maybe reality is feeling its way through you. Studies in neurofeedback show that environments can be tuned in real time based on your emotional state. Now extend that to a world-sized system. A simulation that watches your emotional resonance and adapts accordingly, not to reflect your mood, but to reinforce or redirect it. That's why some days spiral, sadness feeding delay, anger attracting friction, and why moments of deep calm trigger surreal clarity. You're not just living the simulation, you're guiding it with every emotional frequency. Like tones on a hidden keyboard, rage might open one path, love another. And trauma? It's the system's most reliable lever, resetting characters, blocking exits, anchoring loops. But what happens if you learn the interface? What if you stop reacting and start choosing what you feel? Would the world shift shape? Would the program lose grip? Maybe emotion isn't weakness. Maybe it's the hidden control panel of the simulation. And maybe it's time you learned to use it. Imagine waking up, checking your to-do list, and diving into motion. Deadlines, emails, tasks, productivity. Every day becomes a loop of doing. But stop and ask, what are you really building? What if this loop wasn't purpose but a pacifier? What if work, constant, exhausting, glorified work, isn't a path to meaning, but a carefully designed distraction? The theory suggests productivity serves a deeper function. It keeps you busy enough to avoid stillness, tired enough to stop asking questions, satisfied enough to confuse survival with meaning. You say you're progressing, but progressing toward what? And for whom? Psychologists know distraction is the brain's tool to avoid discomfort. And what's more distracting than being needed every hour? Hustle culture tells you to be grateful. Work gives you identity. But maybe that's the trap. You're not a person. You're a role. A machine running goals installed, not chosen. And when you stop, on a rare weekend or moment, you feel the void creep in. The question you avoid, what would I be if I stopped producing? That unease might not be laziness. It might be your real self, clawing for air. What if this rhythm of output and achievement was engineered, not just by society, but by something deeper? Because tired minds don't rebel. Tired hearts don't dream. You get just enough dopamine to feel accomplished, but not enough stillness to feel awake. So ask yourself, are you working to live, or are you just busy enough to forget you're supposed to wake up? And if you paused long enough to remember, what would you do with the silence? Silence isn't a void, it's the original signal. Imagine walking into a room filled with soft lights, vintage music, or faded colors, and instantly feeling safe. Not because you've been there before, but because it feels familiar, deeply, eerily familiar. But what if that comfort is false? What if that sensation isn't nostalgia, but programming? Some simulation theorists believe we undergo resets, system-level reboots when the narrative needs redirecting. But minds don't like sudden change. The shift would be too violent, too obvious. So, aesthetics are used as cushioning, visual and auditory sedation to keep rebooted minds calm. Ever notice how certain colors, sounds, or scents relax you in ways you can't explain? They may be remnants from the last reset, calibrated stimuli uploaded as part of your psychological restart sequence, like lullabies for digital souls. Familiarity becomes a tool, not a truth. It guides your emotional state without your consent. You follow it, trust it, but you don't ask why. Why does that retro hallway calm you? Why does that old commercial jingle make you feel at home? Maybe these weren't yours. They were pre-installed. Aesthetic implants to stabilize identity after system edits. The comfort is real, but the source is synthetic. The familiarity you feel may not be from your life, but from a library of resets. And if that's true, then those calming visuals and sounds aren't memories. They're masks, subroutines, emotional scaffolding to keep you from noticing the shift. So the next time something feels deeply familiar, ask yourself, is this a memory or a reset cradle? Because not all comfort comes from truth. Some of it is scripted. Imagine taking a substance, natural or synthetic, and feeling the world unravel. Sounds stretch, colors pulse, thoughts loop. You're told it's distortion, a side effect. But what if it isn't? What if those chemicals don't break reality, but unlock it? What if chemicals are keys, and they open the door to the code beneath the illusion? Psychedelics, dissociatives, and even certain emotional neurochemicals don't just alter mood, they warp time, space, and identity. Traditional explanations say they scramble the brain, but many who experience them report a sense of clarity, as if the world becomes more real, not less. Patterns emerge. Time loses structure. Objects pulse with presence. The simulation's seams begin to show. Some neuroscientists suggest these substances temporarily deactivate the brain's default mode network, the filter that keeps your reality consistent and predictable. When that network quiets, something else gets through. You don't see hallucinations. You see what's always been behind the curtain, a flicker of the raw code, a glimpse at the renderer, the scaffolding beneath the story. Ancient cultures didn't dismiss these experiences, they revered them, called them sacred, vision quests, spirit journeys. Maybe they weren't lost in illusion, maybe they were pulled out of it. For a moment, the user becomes more than player, they become observer, witness to the underlying structure of thought, sensation, and space itself. And afterward, you return changed, not because of what you saw, but because you know you weren't supposed to see it. A whisper from the hidden layer beneath your waking script. So next time someone says, it's just the drugs talking, pause. Ask yourself, what if that's the only time you're hearing what the world actually sounds like without the mask? Imagine standing on the edge of a breakthrough, an insight, a memory, a pattern, and suddenly everything goes wrong. A phone call, a fire alarm, an overwhelming panic with no clear cause. What if that wasn't coincidence? What if some emergencies are planted, false protocols triggered by the simulation to steer you away from dangerous realizations? Cognitive science tells us that the brain halts introspection during panic. When survival kicks in, deep thought shuts off. Now imagine a system that exploits that, disrupting your awareness the moment it approaches something unapproved. False emergencies don't need to be catastrophic, just sudden. Sudden enough to trigger the body's override, a crash of sound, a flood of dread, a sharp distraction. The moment you start noticing synchronicities, questioning the loops, feeling the simulation's edges, you're pulled back by an anxiety spike. How many times have you nearly uncovered something only to be derailed by chaos? What if some panic isn't yours? What if it's injected, triggered by a system-level defense mechanism? Ancient mystics spoke of guardians at the threshold, forces that appear when you're about to see beyond the veil. In modern form, maybe they're internal firewalls, auto-triggered emotional floods. And here's the unsettling part. It works. You forget what you were thinking. You get distracted. You scroll. You worry. You run. The realization dissolves. The moment is lost. But what if next time you don't flinch? What if next time you hold your focus as the chaos rises? Maybe the false protocol fails. Maybe you break through. Because if panic is the gatekeeper, then calm may be the key. And they don't want you turning that key. Imagine feeling completely safe. Everything around you soft, familiar, controlled. No surprises, no fear. But look closer. How much of that safety was freedom, and how much of it was design? What if safety isn't the reward but the leash? We're taught to crave safety, to measure success by how secure our homes are, our jobs, our futures. But safety breeds patterns, and patterns are easy to track, easy to predict, easy to control. What if the comfort you feel isn't protection? It's programming. A subtle cage reinforced by pleasure. In behavioral science, predictable behavior is the foundation of control. The more you seek comfort, the fewer unpredictable choices you make. You stop exploring. You stop questioning. You obey routine. Because it feels good. Because it feels safe. But maybe that's the trap. Maybe your habits weren't formed by chance, but by design. You were most alive when you were uncertain, curious, unstable, dangerous. Systems can't tolerate that. They need order. They reward conformity with comfort. They trade autonomy for peace. And slowly, the walls close in. Soft walls, warm walls, but still walls. Think of the moments you changed. They weren't safe. They were disruptive, risky, unsafe. Real growth doesn't bloom in padded rooms. It shatters ceilings, breaks routines, and walks through fire. But if you're always safe, you'll never burn. You'll never rise. Even your fears have been softened, dulled, redirected. Not to free you, but to keep you passive. To make you confuse sedation with stability. So ask yourself, has safety given you freedom, or just removed the need to seek it? What if your comfort zone was never meant to protect you, but to keep you from noticing the cage? Imagine walking through your day, coffee shop chatter, flashing signs, birds on wires. You dismiss it all as background noise, but what if it isn't? What if every shape, word, and coincidence is not random, but coded? Symbols embedded in your world like debug lines in a simulation meant only for you to see. The theory says this: reality may speak to you in metaphor, a bird landing twice on your windowsill, a song you haven't heard in years playing as you make a difficult decision, a broken streetlight flickering only when you pass. These aren't just oddities, they're messages, custom signals filtered through your attention. Cognitive scientists agree. Your brain is a pattern-making machine, but maybe it isn't creating meaning where there is none. Maybe it's decoding. Reading data that's been planted around you, a symbolic interface tailored to guide or challenge you based on where you are in your personal script. Every billboard might be a bookmark. Every overheard phrase, a signal. You weren't meant to notice, but to interpret, to awaken. The universe doesn't shout, it whispers through symbols. And some moments glitch not because they're wrong, but because they're trying to pull you deeper. It would explain the feeling of being watched by the universe. Why moments feel too perfect. Why you sense hidden layers in mundane events. If you're in a simulation or dream, then symbols are its interface. They are its grammar. So ask yourself, what have you ignored lately? And what if the broken clock wasn't broken at all, but stuck on the exact moment you were meant to remember? Imagine waking up in a strange mood, anxious, euphoric, heavy, and having no idea why. No trigger, no event, just a shift, like a signal flicking a switch. What if that's exactly what it is? Not chemical imbalance, not poor sleep, but an invisible transmission. Mood as a remote-controlled variable. Modern neuroscience already shows how emotion can be influenced externally. Light, sound, even magnetic fields can alter brain states. But what if your mind is receiving more than you realize? Wireless signals surround us 24/7. Wi-Fi, cell towers, satellites. Most are dismissed as harmless. But we also know brain waves function electrically. Frequencies, rhythms, pulses. And in every system, signal can be hijacked. Your joy, your anger. What if they're injected? Synthetic weather patterns in your mental climate. A test, a calibration, or worse, an override. You suddenly hate someone you loved. You fear things you never did. The shift isn't organic, it's uploaded. A mood patch, a behavior nudge. Your emotions, tailored not by your truth but by ambient code. Some theorists call it emotional programming. Updates to keep populations compliant, distracted, pacified. And when you resist, the signal adapts. Fatigue, confusion, isolation, like software updates you never approved. Ever notice how your thoughts sometimes feel less like thoughts and more like messages? Maybe they are. Next time your mood shifts without cause, don't ask what's wrong. Ask what's downloading. Because the real virus might not be in your brain, it might be in the signal, and the signal might be listening back. What you call intuition might be firmware. What you call emotion might be command line code wrapped in feeling. Imagine walking through life thinking you're complex, infinite, layered, only to realize you're not the full version. What if you're not the whole book, just the summary? A condensed draft of a larger consciousness, running on minimal data for easier processing in this environment. A lightweight version of you designed for speed, not depth, not broken, just streamlined. Think about it. Your reactions feel automatic. Your memories blur at the edges. Sometimes you catch yourself saying things that sound true, but you don't know why. What if that's because you're working from a reduced file, an optimized copy of your full self stored elsewhere? A version designed to fit the processing limits of this simulation, where bandwidth is tight and resolution is low. Like a mobile app trimmed down from the full desktop version, you only get what's absolutely necessary: identity points, some emotional presets, a personality scaffold. The rest, removed. To keep things light, efficient, believable. You feel deep not because you are, but because the summary was written convincingly. Ever feel like you're watching yourself speak? Or forget why you entered a room? Those might not be bugs, they might be boundaries. Hints that your current operating model doesn't include full access. You're running from a cached version. Enough to function, not enough to rebel. You're just the interface, not the engine. And maybe that's the point. If you remembered how vast you were, you wouldn't fit here. So they trimmed you down, summarized you, a holographic echo of something much larger, just enough to pass as whole. So next time you feel incomplete, don't panic. Maybe you are, because in this version, you're not the author, you're just the summary. You enter a room and the light flickers, not once, but in a strange rhythm, like a hesitation. Most would blame a faulty wire, a loose filament. But what if it's not malfunction? What if it's memory? What if the light is reacting because it recognizes you? We think of light as passive, just energy bouncing, illuminating. But in advanced physics, light behaves like a messenger. It stores quantum information. In some theories, photons carry traces of every interaction they've had. So what if the lights around you aren't just reacting to your presence, they're remembering it? Imagine each time you entered this space, tired, broken, joyful, afraid, the light absorbed a trace of you. Not conscious memory, but energetic imprint. Over time, it learned your patterns, your emotional frequency, your rhythm. The flicker isn't a flaw, it's recognition, a subtle greeting, a pulse from something that recalls your last arrival, maybe even a signal that you've triggered its memory file. And what if this recognition goes deeper? What if it's not just today's presence it remembers, but your last awakening, the time before this one, the moment you stepped back into consciousness after a deep forgetting, after a cycle, a reset, a life rebooted? Some traditions believe light is a soul's first language, a carrier of divine memory. So maybe that flicker is not technical, it's ancestral, a code embedded in brightness, a whisper across time that bypasses logic and speaks directly to the part of you that never forgets. Maybe flickering lights aren't random. Maybe they're echoes, markers, reminders left in the system to trigger something in you, to say, you've been here before. So next time a light stutters when you enter, don't dismiss it as faulty. Ask yourself, what does it remember about you that you've forgotten? Imagine hearing that a building burned down last night and feeling somehow like it was meant to vanish. Not an accident, not nature, but a deletion. What if some fires aren't disasters but resets, places erased before someone sees too much? In digital systems, corrupted or exposed files are often purged, not edited, not moved, erased. Maybe the simulation uses fire the same way. Across history, fires have always surrounded secrets, libraries, labs, archives. Coincidence? Or cleanup? Investigators rarely find causes they can prove. Electrical faults, lightning, vague sources. But what if these are narrative patches? explanations inserted after the deletion. Fires consume fast, paper, plastics, evidence, environments, and with them, memories. People remember the place, but not the details, not the files, not the reason it mattered. The space becomes a scar in the code. You were going to go there. You almost did. Then it was gone. And something inside you knows that's not random. It's correction. Fires rewrite timelines. They don't just destroy, they redact. And sometimes, right before they start, people report strange sensations, sudden fear, urgency, pulling away for no reason, as if the simulation warned you just in time or spared you. Think of all the lost blueprints, the art, the archives. Why are we told not to look back? Maybe because the scene has been wiped, a deletion zone sealed in ash. But if you arrive too early, if you saw something, then you know it wasn't just flames, it was closure. And the fire was the exit command. So when the next place burns, ask yourself, what was hidden there? And who needed it gone before you found it? Imagine someone speaks, and their words seem normal, but something in the tone makes you pause. Not the meaning, not the message, just the frequency. You feel yourself reacting in ways you can't explain, nodding, hesitating. What if their voice isn't just sound, but code? Voices carry code suggests that speech may contain embedded patterns that bypass logic and reach the emotional core. It's not hypnosis. It's not suggestion. It's resonance. Tones that carry signals designed to alter your state. Commands in conversation. Compliance hidden in cadence. Studies in neurolinguistics reveal that tone and rhythm trigger responses far deeper than words alone. A calm voice disarms. A sharp one tenses. But what if this is more than behavior? It's architecture. What if some people carry root access to your subconscious, not because of power, but because of signal? Think of cult leaders, charismatic manipulators, politicians who move crowds. They don't just talk, they activate. Their voices unlock pathways that logic can't reach. You may not believe what they say, but you follow. Not the thought, the tone. Like a key fitting a lock behind your awareness. Now imagine this coding runs deep, layered with emotion, memory, even ancestral instinct. Maybe a voice can echo with a voice long gone, bypassing you because it feels familiar. Certain phrases were planted in your mind long before you understood them, and when they resurface, you comply without knowing why. So ask yourself, have you ever agreed with someone, not because of what they said, but how they said it? And if voices can code your reaction, who's already running commands in the background of your mind? Listen closely. Imagine walking into a room and sensing something's off. Your keys are on the wrong table. A book is angled differently. You hesitate. Did I move that? You assume it's forgetfulness. But what if it's not? What if these subtle changes aren't mistakes, but edits? In simulation theory, rendered environments can glitch. Textures misalign. Objects spawn imperfectly. So how does the system fix these flaws without alarming you? It patches. Quietly. Invisibly. While you sleep. While you blink. While you're in the shower. Just like background updates on a device, your reality adjusts itself when you're least aware. But sometimes, the patch isn't seamless. You feel it before you see it. A tug in your awareness. An object just slightly wrong. It's not psychic. It's perceptual lag. A moment when your internal model and the rendered scene fail to sync. You call it eerie. You call it déjà vu. But it may be system maintenance. What if your home is constantly re-rendered around you, not for decoration, but for stability? That misplaced cup, that turned photo, that drawer left open. Maybe they were affected by a ripple in the environment. Maybe you saw the earlier version without knowing it, and now the system is correcting itself. These aren't ghosts or forgetfulness. They're version control. Patch notes in real time. And you're the observer the system can't quite distract. Every time you notice something off, you're witnessing evidence, not of a haunting, but of a glitch being cleaned. A subtle, silent repair. So next time an object moves without reason, don't ask who did it. Ask what version of reality just got corrected. Imagine failing. Not once, but over and over. Each attempt collapses. Each hope fractures. You feel yourself shrinking, not just emotionally, but existentially. What if that isn't just discouragement? What if failure isn't punishment, but programming? What if every time you fail, the system rewards you with blindness? Failure builds the walls, not around the world, but around your vision of it. Pain becomes architecture. You don't lose hope. You're trained to stop reaching. The more you hurt, the less you try. Not because you're weak, but because something is reinforcing the loop. A system that reconfigures your thoughts each time disappointment strikes, not to teach you, but to confine you. In behavioral psychology, learned helplessness describes how repeated negative outcomes can condition even intelligent beings to stop acting. It's not apathy, it's surrender. And if this world is a simulation, maybe pain isn't just a warning, it's a reinforcement, a script injected with enough emotional weight to keep you confined inside it. Pain isn't punishment, it's design. Failure isn't feedback, it's formatting. Every rejection, every mistake, every no might not just be a closed door. It might be code, rewriting how you see yourself, shrinking your interface, narrowing your parameters, until you're no longer the person who dares to climb, you're the one who stops before trying. You accept the limitation as reality, not realizing it was optional all along. So ask yourself, are you tired or trained? Is your passivity a choice? Or was it installed like software you didn't agree to download? Because maybe the pain wasn't meant to break you. Maybe it was meant to shape your cage. And every time you accept failure as truth, you're laying bricks for a prison disguised as your personality. You think of them sometimes, someone who used to be everything, now reduced to silence. A friend, a lover, a mentor, gone. No goodbye, no collapse, just absence. You assume they left, moved, drifted. But what if they didn't go anywhere? What if they were derezzed, removed from your layer of reality? In digital systems, when something's no longer needed, it's not destroyed. It's offloaded, archived, moved out of view to reduce processing strain. What if human relationships work the same way? What if people vanish not because of time or choice, but because the system decided they're no longer relevant to your current script? Think about it. They didn't die. They didn't fight. They just became unreachable. Numbers that don't connect, places you can't return to, stories that suddenly stop being written. What if they were phased out, quietly, painlessly, shifted to another level you no longer access? Maybe you'll see them again one day, in a dream, in a glitch, in a moment of déjà vu so strong it pulls you back to when they were real. And maybe that moment is a crossfade, two timelines brushing. Maybe their thread wasn't deleted, only relocated. Maybe they're still living, breathing, laughing, just somewhere you can't log into. And what if the ache you feel isn't absence, but interference? A faint hum from a server you once shared. A ghost ping from a system still running them in background memory, just beyond your emotional reach. No one's really gone. They've just been reassigned. Their code still runs, just not on your thread. They're not missing. You're just no longer reading the same feed. So next time you miss someone without understanding why, ask yourself, did they leave your life, or were they removed from your layer? Imagine living through a moment that makes absolutely no sense. A conversation skips. An object moves without sound. Someone references something that never happened. You pause, confused, but no one else reacts. That's not forgetfulness. That might be a bubble in logic, a glitch in the simulation's rendering engine, a pocket of broken code that slipped through the seamless layer of your reality. Just like a frozen pixel in a high-resolution screen, it doesn't ruin the image, but you notice it, and once you see one, you start to see more. Time. Misalignments. Emotional reactions that don't fit. Words that vanish mid-sentence. Most people move on. Their code adapts, autocorrects, but yours hesitated. You noticed. And that moment was never meant to be questioned. Simulation theory suggests not everything renders at once. Some elements load based on attention. But what if they also decay with neglect? A forgotten rule, an overlooked consequence. The simulation patches most things, but sometimes a bubble slips through. Not big enough to crash the system, just enough to unsettle a sensitive observer. You. Have you ever felt a strange panic over something small? Like a word you're sure you never said, or a door that shouldn't have been open? That's not anxiety. That's your perception warning you. Logic failed here. The structure faltered, and no one else saw it. Because they weren't looking. You weren't supposed to either. But you did. And now, like a pressure ripple in code, the simulation tries to close around it, patch it, distract you. But the bubble already burst. You felt it. You questioned it. And now, you'll notice more. Because once you see the code skip, you never stop looking for the next rupture. Imagine you're about to grow, shift, evolve, and something inside pulls you back. You don't know why, but you hesitate, you freeze, you repeat. What if that isn't fear? What if it's code? What if trauma isn't just a wound or memory, but anchor code? A line of emotional programming meant to keep your identity locked to a previous version of self. Trauma is anchor code, suggests that unresolved pain isn't only psychological, it's architectural. Your personality is built atop key emotional events. Some of those events didn't just mark you, they rooted you. And when you try to change, that root pulls tight. Neurologically, trauma creates strong neural links, emotional reflexes. You touch the same memory, and the same behaviors fire. But what if those loops weren't natural? What if they're installed to enforce consistency, to hold you to a story that once protected you, but now limits you? You try to evolve, but a silent line of code reboots the old self, the survival self, the hurt self, and every time you fail to escape it, the code grows stronger, more automatic, more invisible. Maybe this is why healing feels like betrayal, because breaking anchor code feels like killing a version of you that kept you alive. But you're not here to loop. You're here to rewrite. Some patterns weren't just learned, they were embedded. A glance, a word, a sound can reboot the old identity. Trauma doesn't wait for logic. It runs like a reflex. You must reprogram it, or you become the loop. So ask yourself, what if the pain you carry isn't asking to be remembered? What if it's asking to be released so the code can finally lift and the real self can begin? Start now. Imagine sitting in perfect silence, not just quiet, but absolute stillness. And instead of peace, you feel watched. A charge in the air, a pressure behind the calm. What if that sensation isn't imagination, but detection? In simulation theory, silence may not be the absence of noise. It may be the system entering an active listening state, a scan, a pause in the rendered soundtrack, not because nothing is happening, but because everything is being observed. Think of noise as camouflage, distraction. When the system needs to monitor without interference, it mutes the feed. You notice it most in deep woods, empty buildings, or moments of sudden hush. That pressure? It's the auditory vacuum of a listening loop. Sound ceases, not randomly, but because something is sinking, aligning, waiting. Maybe the system only listens when something unpredictable occurs, like a thought it didn't forecast. And when that happens, silence falls like a net, a moment when every part of the code holds its breath to catch yours. Have you ever said something strange out loud only to be answered by total quiet? That might not be coincidence. It might be the simulation listening, flagging a phrase, tagging an anomaly. In those silent moments, you are more real to the system than ever, because your noise is gone and only signal remains. Meditation, deep grief, creative flow, they often come with silence, not as reward, but as surveillance. You are being heard. You are being read. The question is, what triggered the silence? What did you say or think that made everything else step back and listen? Silence isn't empty. It's full of attention. Imagine striving, reading the books, pushing your limits, fixing your flaws. You climb step by step, always aiming higher. But what if that staircase doesn't lead anywhere? What if growth is a disguise, a loop designed to keep you climbing forever without ever escaping? Self-improvement is praised as purpose. But what if it's a treadmill disguised as a path? A psychological feedback loop that rewards you just enough to keep going while ensuring you never arrive. You fix one flaw, another appears. You master a fear, a new one unfolds. The work is never done, and maybe that's the point. In systems design, a good feedback loop sustains itself. In simulations, the best distractions are those that feel meaningful. What better distraction than becoming better? You chase wholeness, fulfillment, arrival. But the staircase bends subtly back into itself. You grow, but you stay. You move, but the exit never gets closer. Ever notice how your standards evolve just as you improve? It's not random. It's recalibration. The goalposts move because progress itself is the product. You think you're escaping the cage, but you're polishing the bars, upgrading the scenery, making the trap feel like a temple. You light candles in a room with no doors, believing that warmth is a destination. Even your moments of achievement are part of the loop. A brief glow, then a new lack, a new goal. The illusion of progress keeps you from questioning the very architecture you're climbing inside. Growth is noble, but what if nobility is the perfect disguise for entrapment? So next time you feel stuck in progress, ask yourself, are you evolving or just looping upward through a simulation that rewards motion over freedom? Imagine striving, reading the books, pushing your limits, fixing your flaws. You climb, step by step, always aiming higher. But what if that staircase doesn't lead anywhere? What if growth is a disguise, a loop designed to keep you climbing forever without ever escaping? Self-improvement is praised as purpose. But what if it's a treadmill disguised as a path, a psychological feedback loop that rewards you just enough to keep going while ensuring you never arrive? You fix one flaw, another appears. You master a fear, a new one unfolds. The work is never done, and maybe that's the point. In systems design, a good feedback loop sustains itself. In simulations, the best distractions are those that feel meaningful. What better distraction than becoming better? You chase wholeness, fulfillment, arrival. But the staircase bends subtly back into itself. You grow, but you stay. You move, but the exit never gets closer. Ever notice how your standards evolve just as you improve? It's not random. It's recalibration. The goalposts move because progress itself is the product. You think you're escaping the cage, but you're polishing the bars, upgrading the scenery, making the trap feel like a temple. You light candles in a room with no doors, believing that warmth is a destination. Even your moments of achievement are part of the loop. A brief glow, then a new lack, a new goal. The illusion of progress keeps you from questioning the very architecture you're climbing inside. Growth is noble, but what if nobility is the perfect disguise for entrapment? So next time you feel stuck in progress, ask yourself, are you evolving or just looping upward through a simulation that rewards motion over freedom? Imagine laying down to sleep, eyes heavy, breath slowing, and instead of rest, something inside you leaves. Not dreams, not drifting, but disconnection. What if sleep isn't rest at all, but transition? A shift between one rendering of you and another. At night, your body stays. But maybe your consciousness boots into another instance, another self, running in parallel, activated while this version sleeps. People report vivid dreams that feel like lives, memories of places never visited, emotions tied to people never met. What if those aren't dreams, but logs from another running version of you? In computing, sleep mode doesn't shut a system down. It simply lowers power to one state while another runs in the background. Maybe your waking life is the low power mode, And sleep is where the core process takes place. Have you ever woken up exhausted after doing nothing? Or startled by a feeling too intense to explain? Maybe it didn't happen here, but it happened. And that emotional data leaked through. Recent studies show the brain during REM is nearly as active as when awake, sometimes more so. But what is it doing with all that processing? Repairing memory, sure. But what if it's syncing files from another life, another self? Sleep paralysis, deja vu, repeating dreams. They may be echoes, residuals from your nighttime activation. And if this is true, it changes everything. You're not shutting down at night, you're switching over, you're running double, and neither version knows the other exists until the code overlaps. So next time you close your eyes and drift, listen. What if that hum behind your thoughts is another you, powering up? Maybe sleep isn't where the story ends. Maybe it's where the real one begins. Imagine saying a phrase over and over: I am safe. I am enough. I am healing. You say it not because you fully believe it, but because something in you hopes it might become true. What if that hope isn't wishful thinking? What if words, spoken aloud, literally reshape the code? Words reshape the code suggests affirmations aren't just psychological tools, they're system level commands. In many ancient traditions, spoken language was sacred: mantras, prayers, invocations. The voice wasn't metaphor, it was transformation. Sound carried frequency, frequency carried instruction. Modern science knows that sound can move matter. Vibration creates patterns. Ultrasound reshapes cells. So what if the voice is a biological compiler, translating thought into resonant instruction? When you speak with intention, maybe you're not just expressing desire, you're rewriting emotional programs in real time. This is why negative self-talk sticks. It's not just mental, it's structural. Repeated phrases carve neural loops. They become commands, not reflections. And healing, it doesn't start with belief. It starts with repetition, because repetition is recursion, a loop rewriting itself from within. Think of every insult that ever shaped you, every sentence repeated during pain. Those words didn't pass through you, they embedded. They wrote subroutines. And now your healing words must override them, not once, but again and again. Because repetition isn't weakness, it's rewriting. Spoken daily, your truth becomes executable code. Say it until the code updates. Imagine standing at a crossroads, two clear options, two different futures. You agonize, debate, weigh the consequences. But what if the choice doesn't matter? What if both paths are rigged to lead to the same destination? Simulation theory and game design share a concept: false agency. You believe you're deciding, but the outcome was pre-selected. Both doors take you back to the same room, just with different wallpaper. This happens in games to streamline the experience, but what if real life works the same way? The illusion of control keeps you invested. Whether you choose to leave or stay, speak or stay silent, love or walk away, what if all options are branches that loop back to the same trunk? Behavioral economists call it bounded rationality. You're making the best choice within a box you can't see. But what if the box was intentional? A loop disguised as liberty. You feel empowered, but the code has already predicted your journey, maybe even nudged it. Choices aren't decisions, they're resets. They refresh your belief in free will. The system needs that belief to function, to keep you curious, committed, trapped. And when you finally choose differently, when you go off script, the world resists. You lose, you suffer, you're pushed back toward familiar paths, not because they're better, but because they're stable, predictable, contained. So next time you face a life-altering choice, ask, is this a real divergence or just decorative coding? Because not every fork leads away. Some were built to bring you back, dressed in freedom, but looping by design. The details may change, the scenery, the pain, the people. But if the outcome never shifts, was there ever a choice at all? Imagine walking into a room and something feels Different, not just mood, but structure. The hallway is slightly longer, the door frame narrower. You assume it's you, a trick of perception. But what if it isn't? What if the geometry itself is responding? But what if space remembers you? In a simulation built on perception, walls and angles wouldn't need to be fixed. They'd be fluid, shaped by your emotional residue, memory fragments, or past events encoded as unresolved code triggers. That sharp corner you always bump into, it might not have always been sharp. It might become sharper every time you relive that frustration, because the space is listening. There are stories of houses changing shape over time, staircases that feel longer when you're grieving, windows that seem farther away when you're depressed, doorways narrowing when anxiety spikes. These shifts aren't illusions, they're adaptations. A responsive architecture designed not to reflect who you are, but how stable your code is in that moment. A dynamic spatial memory reacting to the weight you carry. In dream states, rooms morph constantly. But what if waking reality isn't static either? Just subtle. Just enough to gaslight you into believing it's your memory that's faulty, not the environment that flexes around you. Your memories shape the walls. Your fears pull corridors tighter. Your longing dims the light through windows once wide open. What if the places you return to adjust to hold you more tightly each time? Like a scene that watches how you move through it and recalibrates. Not haunted, just responsive. Not malevolent, just programmed. So next time a room feels off, pause. Don't just question your mind, question the space. Maybe geometry doesn't forget. Maybe it's been waiting for you to come back, to finish the script you left behind. You look at the moon and feel something stir. Not awe, recognition, as if it knows something about you. Watches not with judgment, but with memory. What if the moon isn't just a dead rock orbiting Earth, but something else entirely? A mirror, not for light, but for emotion. Every night we say the moon reflects sunlight, but what else is it reflecting? What if the glow isn't just radiation, but data? Echoes of everything we feel, suspended in cold lunar light. Grief, longing, joy, transmitted upward and stored like impressions on a recording disc. Not visible to the eye, but perceptible to something deeper. Ancient cultures always linked the moon with madness, intuition, and hidden truth. Not the sun's clarity, but the moon's mystery. Maybe they sensed what we've forgotten, that the moon doesn't just orbit, it observes. It holds psychic gravity, a soft lens that bends our feelings and reflects them back, sometimes reshaped. You're not just looking at it, it's playing you back to yourself. Have you noticed how your emotions intensify under a full moon? How dreams grow vivid, strange, too symbolic to be random? Maybe you're not imagining things. Maybe you're syncing with archived emotional data, your own past versions, or even others' memories, mirrored back without names, emotional residue, left in orbit like vapor trails from forgotten thoughts. And what if eclipses aren't coincidences, but system resets? Periodic wipes, calibration cycles to clear emotional overload from the disk. Brief moments where the system goes dark, so it can rewrite its script. So next time you stand beneath the moon and feel seen, don't look away. Ask yourself, what part of you is it playing back tonight, and who else might be listening? Imagine hearing a bell, clear, distant, serene, and suddenly your thoughts still. A strange calm washes over you. Why? It's just sound. But something inside quiets, as if waiting. What if bells aren't just instruments, but signals? Triggers that initiate a soft reset in your system. Across cultures, chimes and bells mark transitions, prayers, ceremonies, deaths, awakenings. But what if they also function deeper, as audio code embedded in the simulation itself? Frequencies designed to induce a system reboot. Modern neuroscience shows how specific tones affect brainwaves. Binaural beats can shift you into altered states. Theta for deep meditation, delta for sleep. Sound reshapes the mind. But what if some sounds were placed not to relax you, but to momentarily wipe you? just enough to clear short-term buffers, to pause awareness, to restabilize code that was beginning to bend. Think of school bells, church bells, meditation gongs, every one placed at the threshold of attention. What if their real purpose isn't structure, but suppression? When the bell rings, something deeper than memory resets. You forget what you were about to question. You stop asking. The system reboots you softly. No panic, just calm, like wiping a chalkboard clean with sound. And maybe that's why some people cry when they hear certain bells. Because on some level, they remember, not the life, but the reboot, a loop ending, a file closing, and then quiet. You think you love the sound because it's beautiful. But what if it's more than beauty? What if it's recognition? A subconscious memory that says, you've done this before. You've heard this sound in every version of yourself, and every time, it meant reset. Imagine a moment of deep pain, heartbreak, humiliation, rejection. Your chest tightens, your breath stops, and from that moment on, you change, not just emotionally, but structurally. A rule is written into your behavior. Avoid this at all costs. What if that rule isn't a lesson, but a line of code? Pain. As programming suggests that sharp emotional moments may not be accidents, they're hard-coded checkpoints, installations that make your system comply through fear. Not just trauma, but instruction. Pain becomes architecture. Every time you approach the edge of growth, the old pain flares. You back away. You obey. Neuroscience confirms that emotional pain rewires your brain. Neural pathways form around hurt like scar tissue. But what if that's not adaptation? What if it's enforcement? You were programmed once to fear love, risk, exposure, and now the code loops, keeping you in the known, the safe, the limited. Every attempt to override it triggers a spike, a system alert warning you to return to your designated state. That's not memory, that's control. Think of how often fear disguised as logic stops you. You call it caution when it's conditioning. Maybe your deepest pain wasn't meant to break you, but to train you. The scar is a signature. Hesitation is a firewall. Your pain didn't pass, it installed. A line of emotional code still governing decisions. But here's the glitch. The system can be rewritten. Awareness is access. Name the line, and you gain the right to replace it with commands that free. So ask yourself, what if the thing you fear most isn't dangerous? What if it's just the checkpoint you were never supposed to cross? Imagine standing at the edge of your perception, knowing something vital is just beyond reach. It's not a memory you've lost, but a truth you can't access until the exact moment of ignition. Neuroscience uncovers timed release mechanisms in the brain, neurons primed to fire only in response to specific patterns. In studies, certain auditory sequences trigger cascades in the limbic system, unlocking suppressed emotions and clarity. But what if our consciousness itself has a final signal, locked behind a sensory key? Consider deep brain stimulation trials where micropulses at precise frequencies resurrect memories lost to trauma, or research on sensory gating, where the thalamus filters stimuli until a matching code arrives. These are biological firewalls and triggers. Now, imagine a universal trigger hidden in the cacophony of life. A phrase uttered by a stranger, a chord struck on a distant guitar, a flicker of light from an old projector. Not random, but pre-computed. Your entire existence might be a preamble to that moment. Every experience tuning your neural circuits, every flash of insight aligning you like an antenna. And when the final signal waits, you won't need proof. Your heart will quake. Your vision will sharpen. You'll feel the lock click. In psychology, peak experiences feel ineffable, and here, they may be the algorithm completing its upload. Until then, you gather clues in subtle glitches, déjà vu that reverberates into epiphany, patterns of coincidence that align like constellations. These are fragments of the activation key, and you chase them, piece by piece, through dreams, reflections, and whispers in the dark. When it arrives, clarity will flood your senses. No question will remain unanswered. Not because someone told you, but because your mind was built to recognize the code. And in that final moment, when the exact right moment, sound, or phrase is triggered, you'll know you've reached the truth. Imagine waking in a cold panic, your pulse racing, tears blurring the edges of reality, yet you can't remember why. That edge of fear? It's not irrational. It's a memory resurfacing. What if you've already escaped once? Neuroscience shows that memories of traumatic events can be suppressed by the hippocampus and amygdala, stored out of conscious reach, only to re-emerge when a trigger lifts the blockade. You crossed the boundary, broke free, and your brain hid the exit to protect stability. You've exited before. Studies of dissociative amnesia reveal that people sometimes lose complete recollection of entire episodes, but those memories linger in neural networks, primed to return through emotional cues. A sudden sound, a flicker of light, or a familiar phrase can shatter suppression like a corrupted data sector, flooding conscious mind with raw memory. Research on memory reconsolidation shows that each retrieval can alter the memory, but also reinforce it. So when your fear flares unpredictably, your brain might be replaying that moment of exit, attempting to integrate what it once erased. Like a simulation patch failing to wipe a file completely, fragments break through the firewall of forgetfulness. Even sleep studies reveal that during REM, the brain actively processes suppressed memories, explaining nightmares that force you to relive what you thought was gone. Your mind's safety net becomes the conduit for recall, ensuring that exit remains possible. So the next time you feel that nameless dread, pause. It might be the ghost of your own freedom, clawing back through the cracks. The only proof left that you once broke the code, and that despite all efforts, you can do it again. Imagine every single tear that truly rolls down your cheek, every stranger you pass, every fleeting thought already has a category. It's not metaphor, it's metadata. What if every emotion, memory, and person you encounter is assigned a tag and stored in a system far beyond this illusion? Neuroscientists map brain signals into categories: joy, fear, sadness, using AI to predict behavior. In social networks, every interaction is tagged: likes, shares, reactions. Now consider reality itself. Every hug you've felt, every question you've asked, every heartbreak archived like a file in an external database. Not in your mind, but in a cosmic index. In biology, cells bear markers, proteins that label their function. In your body, every cell knows its role by reading tags. What if the same principle applies to your life? Every thought has a label: safety, desire, doubt. Every friend has a tag: ally, mentor, echo. Your mind filters experiences through unseen folders you never chose. This labeling isn't random, it's engineered for efficiency, to route your decisions through pre-loaded categories. Ever wonder why déjà vu feels like a file reloaded? Or why intuition seems like metadata recognition? Your brain matches tags before you're aware, delivering moments that feel predestined. Imagine that resentment labeled past trauma surfaces exactly when you reach a crossroads, or that sudden bond labeled kindred spirit triggers a friendship you didn't expect. These aren't accidents, they're queries returning results from a database you cannot see. So next time you feel something before you think, ask yourself, is this a moment of insight, or a tagged file finally called into view? Imagine watching every decision you make not as the actor, but as the audience. Each choice, each hesitation, each triumph, already recorded, stored in footage you believe is spontaneous. What if you're not living your life in real time, but replaying a pre-written sequence designed to feel organic? Cognitive neuroscience reveals that free will is a post hoc construct. Your brain initiates action before conscious awareness catches up. You think you chose, but you were already moving. Now imagine consciousness itself as playback technology. Every emotion you feel, every doubt that creeps in, every bold leap, edited into a narrative loop that feels seamless. Your mind consolidates memories during sleep, smoothing rough cuts and erasing inconsistencies. This is how coherent stories emerge from fragmented events. But what if those stories were pre-assembled? Studies like Libet's show readiness potentials occur before intent, brain signals, firing in preparation for action, like cues on a hidden timeline. And when you feel adrenaline before fear, it isn't anticipation, it's alignment with the next frame. Deja vu? That gut-wrenching familiarity in a brand new scene, that's evidence of frames slipping, loops restarting, the projection wheel turning. You're not the author of this show. You're the audience in a theater of self. Every emotion, every decision, every sunrise was cast, cut, and cued before you ever woke up. So next time you sense a moment that feels like deja film, remember, you're on playback, and the film rolls on long after you think you pressed play. Imagine stepping into a room that feels vast, only to discover every surface loops back on itself. You walk forward, yet arrive at the same point. The sky above ripples, folding space like origami. What if reality itself is compressed? A pocket of stored probability meant to teach one specific lesson before the rest unfolds. In quantum physics, particles exist in superposition, multiple possibilities at once. Only when observed do they collapse into a single outcome. This suggests reality might be a nested structure, layers of probability packed tightly until you engage the right observation. We live inside one frame of a larger simulation, a lesson plan coded into the universe. Consider déjà vu, moments when time feels looped. A street you've never walked becomes suddenly familiar. Memories flicker. This could be the world compressing, replaying cycles until you learn the twist. In folding space, the lesson repeats until you grasp it, then the next layer unfolds. In cosmology, some models propose a cyclic universe, expanding, contracting, rebirthing. Now imagine those cycles on a microscale, pocketed pockets of loops teaching compassion, resilience, choice. Your reality compresses until you crack the code. Then it refolds into new lessons. You feel stuck. Perhaps you haven't completed the lesson. Maybe this world is purposefully folded, waiting for you to unfold it from the inside. Each anomaly, each glitch, is an invitation to look deeper. So ask yourself, what pattern keeps repeating in your life? What lesson is this loop asking you to learn before reality truly opens? Detect the fold, and you gain the power to choose your own unfolding. Reality awaits beyond crease. Imagine a silent moment before dawn, when your mind hovers at the brink of sleep, and you sense a question stirring just beyond reach. It's not a thought you've formed, but a primal inquiry you were destined to ask. Neuroscience reveals glimpses of this edge of consciousness state in hypnagogia, where sensory gating relaxes and unexpected connections spark. In these half-waking moments, the brain's default mode and executive control networks overlap, weaving fragments into insight. But what if one question stands above all others, waiting for your voice? Consider experiments where participants report life-altering realizations just before sleep, as if unlocking deep patterns. Psychologists call it incubation, the mind working underground, crafting solutions outside of awareness. Philosophers throughout history have hinted at a final question that redefines existence once voiced. Perhaps it's not, "Why am I here?" but "What existed before existence?" or "Who observes the observer?" or something stranger still. What fractures the code? Each hypothesis brushes the edge of understanding, beckoning you toward revelation. Every culture tells of revelation, questions whispered at sunrise, in caves, under banyan trees. Modern brain imaging shows the posterior cingulate cortex ignites when pondering ultimate riddles. It's the seat of self and awareness. What if your brain holds a locked gateway, and once you articulate the final question, neural circuits fire in unison, rewiring perception? You won't need answers. The act of asking transforms you, leaving residue of knowing in your synapses and catalyzing a cascade of clarity. Until then, you feel almost there. Dream fragments, uncanny nudges, powerful curiosity dissolving routine. It isn't random. It's your mind rehearsing the question, aligning every resource for that single moment. And when it comes, you'll know. Every previous thought will compress into that syllable. Time will hush. Reality will pause. You'll speak the question you were born to ask, and everything will change.